You doing the Allah, or am I doing
Oh,
it?
no, I feel like we have to.
Go ahead.
I feel, ya Allah. I feel we have to start that way.
Yeah, so let me
Need some baritone ya Allah.
Are we on?
We are on. Let me
on.
do the intro real quick. I'm going to try to do the best I can.
Are you going to rap?
I'm going to rap a little bit.
You're going to spit some bars. Whoa, what happened?
You ready?
Yeah.
All right, y'all infidels. This is the Conspiracy Horsemen. It's Wednesday, March 20th, 2019. I get lost in your eyes, and I feel my spirits rise and soar like the wind. Is it love that I'm in? I get weak in a glance. Isn't that what's called romance? And now I know, because when I'm lost, I can't let go, motherfucker. I don't know not knowing what I'm heading for. You can take me to the skies. It's like being lost in heaven, motherfucker. When I'm lost in your eyes. Motherfucker. I just fell. Don't know why. Something's there we can't deny. And when I first knew was when I first looked at you, motherfucker. And if I can't find my way, salvation seems worlds away. Oh, I'll be found when that's it, motherfucker. Welcome to the show. How's that?
Nice.
Yeah. For anyone who missed that, you missed fucking legend. You have just missed legend.
Debbie Gibson's rolled her over in grave. She's not even dead.
Just understand that right now, Debbie Gibson just come in her own panties right now. Wherever she is online at the Rita's getting a free icy or the Dairy Queen getting a free small cone. Right now, she is soaked and her panties are dropped. She has no idea why either.
Who came quicker, Debbie Gibson or Billy Ray when he was at Neverland Ranch?
That's a good point. That is a good
me
point.
and Neverland Ranch for sure, bro. I had a
Oh,
blast
wait, I'll
there.
get ready.
Yeah.
Right there, $600 well spent. So we got special guest host for us, even though we literally are probably going to take the show away from at least a dozen times. He came back after we tortured him the first time. That was waterboarding. This is more like flying planes basically into his virtual buildings of his life. That's what we're going to do. And that's a hell of an intro. I'll stay back to the rap. When I get lost in your eyes, motherfucker, it's Billy Ray Valentine.
What's going on, motherfucker? It's Billy Ray Valentine. Happy to be here yet again. I got waterboarded apparently the first time, but I already learned. See, I'm not even trying to host. Stevie's doing this. I'm just going to sit back and take whatever's thrown to me and give it out that way. I'm not falling into this trap twice. Like George Bush said. Exactly. Who was going to say it? What were you going to say, Sal?
I was going to say, you're just going to take it, when thrown to you like the cock at Neverland Ranch.
That's twice. Hey, I got no problem with it, man. Whatever. It's all good. Go ahead.
We brought the 5G fucking juice back today, baby.
Now, we are going to have some semblance of order, but before we get to that, I'll introduce what we're going to, because we have a special guest tonight, Don Jeffries, which Sal actually laid down some background information that even Billy Ray didn't know about, and he had him recently on the Infinite Fringe. So, Sal, what's going on, man?
What's up, everybody? This is a good day today. Well, it's not a good day. Today's a shit day, but today is a good day for this. This is a great day for this. This day couldn't have landed on a better day.
What is this that you speak of? What is this going to be?
This is Wednesday. This is the Conspiracy Horsemen. I'm here with the brothers. I'm here with Billy Ray Valentine, who I gotta say, I was listening to the Infinite Fringe with that cuckoo bird you had about the fucking mammograms and the MRIs. What was going on with her?
Hey, man.
Listen.
Uh-huh.
I'm all about it. I'm okay. Just being. Just listen. I was listening to her. I was listening to her on the way in, and I was like, all right. And I listened very carefully to you. I was listening very closely to you because I'm trying to read you, and I'm going, what's Billy Ray really thinking about this? What's Billy Ray doing? And you listened. You were a great host. You were a better host than I ever would be, because I'd have been interrupting her every 5 minutes, asking her to explain things. But yeah, I was invested in that whole episode, the Luciferian practices at hospitals and MRIs and all those sort of things. It was very interesting. And Janine was her name. Janine, I give her
Marcelo.
a plug. Yeah. And,
Marcelo Wallace? What's Marcelo Wallace look like?
If you were in a bowl of rice, you'd know, motherfucker. So yeah, there was.
Don't steal my song lyrics.
Yeah, that was. Yeah, I was very impressed, Billy Ray. I was begging for you to have an 800 number I can call in, even though I missed the show. I would love to be in the chat room because I had so many questions.
Like what?
She kept saying they, them.
Okay, see that, and
dark forces.
I think I spoke to Stevie about this. I think, maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was Bello. Shouts to Bello. Shouts to Steve King. There was a specific reason why I did not ask her who they was. I already know the answer to that, and I didn't want it to come out again, so I left it alone.
Who is
So
that?
answer
Can
the
you tell
question.
me?
Who's
That's
that?
very Alex Jones of you. Pop it on. Pop it on's getting hot because we're not putting over the New Force Order podcast. He's the host of the New Force Order podcast.
Well,
I'm very proud of him.
Put the brakes on there, Slappy. Hold
up?
on. I want to know.
No, let's do intros and we'll get back to this so we can talk about it for a little bit because I want to probe this like Michael Jackson probed Billy Ray's asshole in Neverland.
What is this with me and Billy Ray and Michael Jackson?
That's what we're going to find out.
I don't know. I read something on the memo. We're going to find out the truth today.
Should I be a rich man at the very least, man?
Can I finish introducing you, Papadon? I'm asking
go ahead.
Papadon because he had something to say.
Go ahead, motherfucker.
All right. We have Greek God Papadon here, Pro Wrestling Tees / Greek God Papadon, the aspiring comic book writer, comic book director, movie director, wrestler on a national level. I'm just reading your tweet. That's all I'm doing right here. The tweet from earlier. And it's great. That's what I want. I wish I wanted to be all that stuff. I'm not making fun of it, Sal. Stop.
I didn't say a
Stop.
word. What did I say?
You laughed.
Why don't you read the whole tweet?
I'm not on Twitter anymore.
You know what? I can do this. Ready, Papa Don? He is a comic book artist.
Yes.
Would like to be a movie director, star in a Kevin Smith movie. Right? Am I right?
Yeah.
Right? Be a better father. Being a better father. Be a better and a kinder person. Papa Don, I applaud you, sir.
There's serious. I think there was 3 or 4 things before the kind of person deal. I think there was.
Yes,
there was
it
quite
was.
a few.
You want me to let you know off the top of my head? The guy, I don't know who the guy was. For a second, I thought it was a friend of mine, but it wasn't. It was. Sorry. I actually answered the tweet because I thought it was a different person. So
Yeah,
I worked
wondering.
myself into a shoot.
I was wondering. I'm going. Papa Don went into that real smooth. There was no comments or
The
anything.
guy's name was Matthew K. I thought it was Stryker, but then I realized Stryker doesn't tweet under Matthew K. He tweets under at Stryker, and that was after I sent the tweet, so I didn't delete it. It said, "What do you aspire to be? Follow your dreams." Whatever the tweet was, I said, "Well, I want to be a comic book artist. I would like to star in a Star Wars film, star in a Kevin Smith film. I would like to
wrestle on a national level.
Wrestle on a national level, whether it's New Japan, AEW, ROH, WWE." Whatever, on a consistent basis, not just one shots here and there. I said I would like to direct a movie. I would like to sell a screenplay. These are all dreams of mine.
These are all awesome aspirations, by the way.
I said I would like to be a better husband, a better father, overall a better person. That's it.
Kinder and nicer were your exact words. Not even overall better. Kinder and nicer, which is a great aspiration.
Thank
Great
you. I
aspiration, sir.
appreciate that.
I
You
was
know,
not
I got
making
all
fun of it. I just want to be clear
I
for
know.
the
I
record.
know you weren't. I know you weren't. I know you weren't. Because if you did, you would say, "Great tweet there, bud." Oh, sorry, wrong person.
Certain things in life never get old, and that's currently one of them. So, are we going to get this? So who's the special guest we have on tonight that you had on the Fringe, Billy Ray?
Don Jeffries is coming on with me, so he's a host over at Truth Frequency Radio. Hidden History, he wrote that book, Survival of the Richest. He wrote that book as well. That's his newest book, and he's in the process of writing yet another. He's a pretty deep conspiracy theorist. He's a journalist. He writes for American Free Press, and he's going to be joining us here today on a Horseman. So, good friend of mine. I'm happy to bring him on. It's going to be a fun conversation.
Good.
I want to get into New Zealand before this is all said and done. All right. What's up?
Can we get some free copies of his book so we can do like an analysis on the show?
Probably not. You're going to have to buy them. Ask whatever money you got from Michael Jackson. You'll be able to.
You got the money, brother. That's all. Who beat it? You or him?
I told you I got the raw end of the deal if you guys are right, because I'm broke.
Literally.
Yeah. He literally
raw end.
Yeah.
So do we want to address the New Zealand stuff first, or do we want to interview Don? Is Don ready to go, or
Don's been ready to go for a bit, so let me just get him in here.
Oh, well, so we've been fucking rambling forever. That's what that means.
Hold on for a second. Go ahead, you guys just talk until.
Will Don talk about New Zealand too, or is that like?
I'm sure he will. We'll just ask him. If he doesn't want to talk about it, he doesn't have to.
Yeah.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, you guys can catch a new podcast in the Hameen Media Group page, I guess, or section. It's the New Force Order. We've already had episode 1. We filmed episode 2 last night, where we talked about prequels versus sequels. So check it out. It's a Star Wars podcast for myself and my friend Spiro. So
you guys go over Revenge of the Sith, right?
Of course.
What an amazing movie it is.
I like it better than Jedi.
Excellent. Good man.
Hey, so Don's here. Go ahead, Stevie.
Hey, Don, how you doing? This is Stevie. I'm going to add you into the video here. We have everybody
Wonderful.
here. How you doing, sir?
Okay, how are you?
Good. You're on the Conspiracy Horsemen with 4 professional wrestlers and a normal person, Billy Ray Valentine. We really appreciate you being on the show, and Sal was giving us actually some interesting background before we even started streaming. So I'll let Billy Ray take it away, and just as a follow up from the Infinite Fringe. But once again, want to thank you for being on. It's myself, Stevie Richards, Greek God popping on, and also Big Sal, who's bigger than both of us. So I'm medium sized, and popping on is lean. Those are our adjectives we use.
My pleasure.
No, while we were trying to add you, or actually just waiting to add you, Big Sal, who was just introduced, 7 foot tall. He was breaking down a little bit of background that I actually didn't even know about you, and I'm going to let him get to that before we do any of that. But we did give you a bit of an intro before you came in, talked about hidden history, and of course, Survival of the Richest, which is your newest book. And you're writing other stuff, and you host a show on TFR. The whole deal. If you want to tell everybody that in whatever way you want to tell them that, and then we can get into whatever you want to get into. I do want to talk about New Zealand a bit. I don't know if you feel any type of way about that. You don't have to if you don't want to. But if you do, I do want to talk about that, and then we can talk about anything else you want to talk about. Go ahead.
Sure. Yeah. Well, my next book is coming out in June, and it's basically a prequel to Hidden History. It's going to be Crimes and Cover-Ups in American Politics, 1776 and 1963. We have Ron Paul committed to writing the foreword, so very excited about that. And I have a book coming out about bullying in schools. It's coming out later this year called Bullyocracy. So it's going to be kind of a change for me, but it's the same kind of thing. I'm basically criticizing the school systems and the way they treat this problem, which is basically to do nothing about it at all. So that's what I do. I tackle a lot of controversial stuff, and Billy Ray can tell you that. I write. I have a blog called Keeping It Unreal where I write regularly on there, and I write about current events. And so yeah, ask me anything you're interested in. I pretty much have a comment, New Zealand or whatever. I'm sure I can have an opinion on it.
I was reading up on you, and I was looking at your blog actually. And I was reading a bit on your brother, right? Yeah. Man, I was getting hot and upset at the same time. Like I was reading it, and I'm like, and it's like I couldn't believe it. But then at the same time, it's not that I couldn't believe it. I grew up in the 80s. You know, I was in school from late 70s and then the 80s. So their solution to any sort of a mental problem was to sedate kids, you know, just Thorazine or whatever they needed to put Ritalin on, whatever, just dump pills down their throat. A kid got out of hand for any reason whatsoever. They were obviously either learning impaired or there was a problem and they had to go, either go to a therapy group or had to go to do this or do that. So I'm reading it, and like I said, I was getting angry, and at the same time I felt for you because, if I were to have to watch that if I had an older brother and I had to watch that happen, it comes back, he's a different guy because that's your world. Your 7-year-old kid, that's your world. So I really I was floored by it. And I just said, just how it happens, and there's nobody pays for it. There is no comeuppance at the end. That teacher didn't get foiled. He didn't slip into the kids didn't, toilet paper his house or anything. There was no payback to that piece of shit. And that guy, who stared, who was on your brother's ass, that drove me nuts just because that asshole got away with it because he had social currency. He had the power, and he's nobody. He's a fucking nobody, but he had the power to torture a kid, and that drove me insane.
Yeah, well, we send our youngsters to these public schools, and basically, if you read, in Bullyocracy, I'll have some great comments by these anonymous kids that either were bullied in school, or most of us are like background players in high school. We don't want to be there. We're bored with it, and that's for a good reason, because it is boring. You don't learn much of anything there. For a very select group of kids who are little celebrities in their school, the popular kids, it's heaven. It's wonderful. It's like a little Hollywood for 4 years, and they have to adapt after they get out. But during that time, they basically run the school systems. And for a similarly small group at the bottom, the trenchcoat mafia types, it's a living hell. And trying to get the school administration to understand what they're going through is obviously something very hard to do. You should look. I don't know if you've seen this week a video went viral on the internet about a guy who was at a Texas school board district meeting who confronted the superintendent of schools with his own bullying from 35 years before. It went viral. I have over 1 million views on there. And he basically told him to his face, and you were the guy that stuck my head in the toilet, the superintendent of schools. Wow. And the superintendent of schools could be heard chuckling and saying, man, this is unbelievable. And then later he made a ridiculous comment where he just basically apologized for the negative attention it brought the school system, and then he played the Jesus card and got all pious and said only one person's going to judge me. So how many others are running the schools that did that kind of stuff when they were in schools? Is this why the problem doesn't go away? Because a lot of them are still in charge of schools.
Well, now, let's be fair. The whole point is the reason we are sent to public schools, why it's mandatory we have to go to these public schools, is to learn to interact with other human beings. The things we're learning there are garbage. We've all learned everything we all learned in the 80s is a lie. It's false, and they're changing it. Okay? That's what all they're doing. We're going there to learn how to stand in line. We're going there to learn how to not freak out if somebody coughs on you in public. We're going there to learn how to share and learn how to play nice and learn how to share our blocks. That's the only reason we're sent to public schools, because they're teaching you nothing. The teachers barely know what they're doing. Because they're being cranked out at such an amazing rate because there's such a call for them. Yeah.
So I got one more thing they might want to add, and Don, if you could add to this or agree or disagree. I think the reason why bullies are allowed to kind of operate, and the reason that the system is allowed to continue the way it is to teach, future citizens to basically submit to the system.
Yes. Absolutely. And I quoted again, one of these anonymous souls in the book. I found so many great comments online. First of all, I found tons of comments from, like, the guy that 35 years before had been bullied, who never had an adequate adult life because they couldn't deal with what they went through as youngsters. And, decades later, they have psychiatric problems. They never got married. They couldn't form relationships. They were afraid to start their own families, and they couldn't find anybody to have kids with. It's tragic. But this one guy, this anonymous soul, said something like, is this why the school systems are set up to teach people early on to obey authority and to understand, is it a slap in the face to hey, this is government for you. These are government-run schools, and we're not even going to protect you when you're a child, when you're in our facility. So it's kind of instructional that you realize when you get out on the streets, the cops are not going to do it, or your politicians are not going to represent you. So I think it really is instructional to a lot of kids, especially the ones that are awakened. And most of the kids that are in high school that are awakened are on that lower end of the spectrum, because they're going through hell and they see through it right away that, hey, this is a joke. These are the people that are supposed to, that are supposed to look out for my welfare, and I shouldn't be coming home. And I've got tales of little girls from kindergarten that are coming home that look like they went 15 rounds with Mike Tyson's in the ring, and the school is telling them, that she fell. It's unbelievable. I don't know what's going on there, but it's just one aspect of the overall corruption. But I think it's an aspect that most people don't talk about.
Now it's a point of they're afraid to talk about it because none of the teachers want to get in trouble. Nobody wants to realize that on my watch, those two kids got the other kid and beat the shit out of him, or that kid pushed this kid down. No, I didn't see it because I was too busy handling 30 other kids.
Well, I have over and over again, I detail accounts of there was one girl that was knocked unconscious inside a classroom Now, and I said, and so many of these incidents happen in a class. There was a case in Canada, and on the rare occasions when somebody tries to stop bullying, they're the ones that are punished. There was a really bold kid, braver than I would have been in high school. Some other kid pulled a knife in class and I don't know if he was actually going to stab another kid or not, but this heroic guy jumped up and went and grabbed the knife and fought and wrestled it away from him. He was punished because it violated their law against some stupid law they had that made the rule that made no sense. But I asked the question, how did the kid pull the knife in class with the teacher there? And this happens over and over again where kids are battered inside classrooms and no one asks the question. I think I'm the only one that's saying, was there an adult present in the classroom? How did this happen? But no one does because, again, people don't want to go there. They don't want to criticize teachers. Teachers have a very good rep with the public, unfortunately. And I'm probably going to piss a lot of them off with this book, but it is what it is. A lot of times they're the ones that are the adult. Most of the times they're the adult that is supposedly responsible, and we're paying them a salary supposedly to educate our kids. So we shouldn't have to worry about them, getting physically injured in their care.
Well, if you're pissing them off, you're doing it right, man.
Yeah, well, that's usually what I do. I end up, as Billy Rake, and we've talked a lot about Trump, and I just talking about politics, I piss off somebody no matter what, because you can't win there. I'm one of these guys where I'm not an irrational hater of Trump, but I'm not a fanboy. So, I just kind of judge it here or there. I write when he does. The rare occasions he does something I support, I write about it and I criticize him otherwise. But you can't win there because it breaks down. People want to see they're in that right-left paradigm.
Yeah. Well, Sal and Papadon went through the New York City school district at different. You guys were in the same school in high school, right? You have
no,
kids,
not high school, but
well, you have kids now. They're in a similar school district. How's that changed, Papadon, from the time you guys went to school to now?
Right now, it's more of a leftist agenda, propaganda teaching scenario where they're embedding leftist ideals into the children and making it, especially at a young age, they're passing it off as truth instead of opinion. That's one aspect. The other aspect is the fact that they're not teaching to learn. They're teaching to cram for a city test or a standardized test, which was contrived by the same people who sold the SAT preparation booklets just so they can make money. At the end of the day, you know me, I always say you follow the money, you follow the truth. And, when money is involved, there's always corruption. So the school system is very corrupt on a broad spectrum. The principals, they just want to get their bonuses. They just want to keep their budgets for their schools afloat. They don't care if the kids are learning. They don't care if the kids are failing. If that's the case, kids are not doing well. They blame the parents. Teachers are being crucified left and right if they want to speak up and actually teach people. They have to follow a certain curriculum. They have to fall in line and obey, just like the kids. I mean,
Sounds like prison.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah,
it basically
exactly
it is
what it is.
Like we said, it's an indoctrination of obeying the government at a young age.
The thing is, I know I kind of came down hard on teachers earlier about saying now teachers don't have this and that, but I know teachers personally now who, I went to high school with, they're teachers now, and they are so worried about sexual misconduct. They're so worried about a kid saying, they touched me if they're alone with them. They're worried about a kid saying, oh my God, this is the female teacher. She's worried about a boy either A, raping her because that's the district she works in, or B, them saying, well, she tried to touch me or she grabbed my penis. So now I'm like, how could you even teach? How could you focus on anything when that's your main concern? It's now again, she cannot and will not be alone with a student. So
the mention of prisons came up, and the analogy there, and I had devoted a whole section of bullyocracy to the prison-like atmosphere in schools, and it's ironic because we have police presence everywhere, and that somehow I've not found one documented account of a police officer stopping a bullying incident ever that's on school. Never had. Somehow they always miss that. They have security video everywhere, yet somehow they don't know who's doing the bullying. And they're locking down these schools for an incredible number of drills, full military type drills. They use schools for this. They did a mock drug raid. They've done mock drug raids. It's unbelievable where at the same time that you have a small percentage of kids that are being bullied and driven to suicide because of it in many cases, you have the rest of the kids are being used as almost guinea pigs in social experiments many times. Not only, as was mentioned earlier, not only are they receiving an inadequate, in most cases they're receiving a social identity type of politics indoctrination where they're okay, what gender are you when you're 6 years old, and that kind of nonsense, and pushing this absurd 57 genders nonsense on people, and Common Core math where you don't even, I guess, I don't know, maybe if somebody thinks math is racist or something, they can't teach it that way anymore. I mean, it's absurd. There's nothing positive going on in the school systems anymore. Again, except for the popular kids, they're getting a lot out of it because they're the ones that are dominating the extracurricular activities. They play sports and they get the adulation from that. So for them, it's a good experience. But for the rest of the kids, it's either boring. In fact, you have these drills, and I describe them. You have to read what some of these drills are like. And then there was a Mothers Against Drunk Drivers, one of my least favorite organizations. I've written quite a bit about them, how they don't care at all about any celebrated person, an NFL player or whatever, driving drunk 8 times, and things like that. They don't care. They're silent. I wrote to them when I was writing Survival of the Richest. I tried to get their response when Dante Stallworth, who was a mediocre receiver in the NFL, was somebody they could have cut and made a message statement without hurting any team. He was shake a tree and a dozen of them fall out. He was nothing special at all, mediocre. He, on a hit and run accident, was driving drunk and killed a guy coming home from work in the morning. He served 20 days in prison. He could have gotten 10 years. And if he had been a member of the public, Mad would have been sitting in court and forcing that judge to give them the strongest sentence possible. But Mad, for a while, I don't know if they still do anymore, but they had this, I don't know what you would call it other than diabolical, this little play that they used to run in school systems where it was they would pretend that a student had been killed in a drunk driving accident. They would announce to the school that that particular student is dead. They would dramatically put a rose on his desk. They would recruit what I'm guessing are probably popular students to be actors in the drama. And then after the kids were distraught all day, crying over the loss of their friends, just feeling what you would feel in something like that, they called an auditorium with the kids assembly in the auditorium. Kids are thinking, okay, well, we're going to talk a little more about losing our classmate. And they bring the classmate directly on the stage, who's in on the joke. And then to say, look, we wanted to open your eyes to, this happens every day. This could happen. I mean, it's a huge psychological trauma they're putting on these kids. And I would go crazy if they did that with my kids in school, because they're not guinea pigs in some laboratory to be toyed with like that. But it happens all the time. And they do these same kind of lockdowns where they'll have a shooter. And we talked about New Zealand, right? The other incidents where people have talked about crisis actors and fake blood and all that. Well, the school systems documented uses crisis actors over and over again. They use fake blood. They have mock shootings, and they usually have a scenario that they script which is suitable for their agenda. It'll be like an angry homeschool dad that'll play the shooter, or it'll be some guy that's angry at the school system for teaching the kids propaganda, which of course they are, and that will be the script scenario behind it. And sometimes they don't even let the teachers in on it. And they never let the students do. So the students, again, they're traumatized. You think there's the principal will say live shooter in the building? I mean, what are you going to think if you're a kid doing it? This is all, and for what? And they'll come out and say, well, we want the kids to be used to the sound of live gunfire. What's this? But this kind of stuff is going on in the school systems at the same time that they're not protecting kids who are being viciously bullied and being notified about it by the parents dozens of times, and they'll sit there and say they didn't know anything about it. So I'm not a fan of our school systems.
Isn't it? Doesn't it have the opposite effect though, Don, that when you start doing these drills and you have fake blood and you desensitize the kids, it's almost like a boy who cried wolf syndrome, where it's like, oh, it's another drill. And It's not a drill. One other thing too, you add a little levity, you just talked about the They thought the kid was dead all day, and then they brought the kid out at the assembly. We have a saying for that in wrestling: Vince Russo strikes again. It's a Russo swerve. It's supposed to be a joke.
It's amazing. I mean, maybe you guys can relate to that on some level, but I mean, it's, I just find, and when people talk about when you talk about the boy that cried wolf, so we're talking about the New Zealand shooting or Parkland, or certainly going back to Sandy Hook bombing. When you analyze these things, and I try to, once in a while I'll get dragged in. I mean, I know a little bit about the New Zealand shooting. I'm just assuming that they're fake every time, because every time you look at them, that's what they prove to be. So I until proven otherwise, I'm not going to trust them, because they're always used for an agenda. They have a kind of a typical agenda behind them. But I mean, when I looked at certainly the Parkland, if you remember the Parkland, which was utilized, and they had a kid on there that was David Hogg, that was, again, acting background. When they looked into him, he had an acting background. The story there is that I don't know if you guys noticed, but they interviewed a female classmate early on, and they scrubbed her right. A lot of these interviews they scrub quickly because they're so damning. And she was, first of all, happy, carefree. This is just a big shooting that's gone on in her school. And she's walking along, and she just kind of matter-of-factly says, yeah, I was talking to him after the shooting. I said, what? She's talking to the shooter? He says, yeah, I bet that was you probably, right? And it's like, wait a minute. So first of all, where was he walking down the hall with his gun? I mean, it made no sense. And then this David Hogg guy, they actually played, he supposedly conducted an interview in a closet. Yes. During the shooting. Yeah. Again, there's so many aspects of these things that you go back to the shooting at the gay nightclub. They had a scene where they were carrying out an alleged victim, and they later found the entire video. And again, this was in the days still when YouTube, you could find a lot more good stuff there. Now these things are really hard to find. You got to dig deep, because they scrub these things quickly, or they never make YouTube certainly now anymore. But they actually caught these guys dropping the alleged victim and all dancing around in celebration afterwards. I mean, this is, but there aren't any journalists there. People like me talk about it and write about it, but I don't concentrate on it too much, because I understand that I'll get pigeonholed. I mean, I'm already writing about very controversial topics, but when you get into that area, I mean, I know I've been told by other people that will publish my stuff that I can't, no, we're not going to do anything about Sandy Hook. They're scared of it, and I don't really understand why. As I said all the time, I'm not accusing anybody of anything there. I just ask you to look at the helicopter footage, which I don't know if you can still find it on the internet, but you look at the helicopter footage from that day during the time in question, and the school, it looks like another day at the park for the school. There's nothing going on at that school, and that's the actual footage. So if you can explain that, where's the conspiracy theory there? Tell me what's going on. Does that look like a mass shooting? There's no victims. There are few cops. No emergency personnel, admittedly, were led into the school, and what little action there is at the firehouse. So explain that. If a real investigative reporter would go after that and say, what's going on here? What is this? Where are the 600 students?
I don't know if you're familiar with Wolfgang.
Yes.
Yeah. So all of everything he did, he never said, oh, this is this reason, this is that reason. He just asked questions. Yeah. He asked questions, and then he was threatened, then he was bullied, then he was deleted off the internet, then he was sued, and then so he's just asking the same questions. It's like I said, when you're asking the right questions and you're pissing people off, and now you're onto something. You found, hey, look at this, guys, a secret door. You found it. You Shaggy and Scoobied your way into something.
Well, that was the first time on national TV where there was Connecticut state troopers that announced literally that if you post anything on social media outside the narrative, you will be prosecuted. Do you guys remember that? That's scary stuff. Like, we will look at your post and arrest you if you don't say along the lines of what we're saying happened.
This goes back to this has been going on a long time. This goes back to the JFK assassination. I published in Hidden History, there was an official documentation for NBC News where they agreed in writing to report only those aspects of the assassination that were in agreement with the FBI report. This is like a day or two after the assassination. So there's one of the three major networks at the time. Not that the other two ever reported truth either, but now it's just more heavy-handed because with YouTube, I mean, with somebody like Alex Jones, regardless of what you think of him, he was the face of the conspiracy world, the biggest celebrity in the conspiracy world. When they took down someone like him and took him off, even PayPal, what does PayPal care about his political beliefs? Right. They took him down from everywhere, and it's very scary. And I don't know what, and I remember at the time, posting on social media about Alex Jones and how awful I thought it was. And so many people were celebrating, especially, again, it gets down to what I call the Trump derangement syndrome. A lot of great leftists who used to know better because of their hatred for Trump personally, they were overjoyed because Alex Jones was a big supporter of Trump. They said, look, this is him today. It might be somebody you like tomorrow. And it's ridiculous because, first of all, he wasn't that extreme, especially about Sandy Hook. If anything, he held back. He had Wolfgang on a few times early on, but he ended up apologizing. He was on Joe Rogan, I think, a couple weeks ago, and he just basically over and over again apologized for Sandy Hook. And it's, come on, man. Last week I had the attorney Todd McMurtry on for the Covington, Kentucky kid, Nicholas Sandman, who is showing, that family is showing a lot more guts than Alex Jones ever did, because they're actually taking these celebrities and these media organizations to court. It could be a landmark, jurisprudence here, because especially if these media people get taken to task for their lies and the fake news and they tried to ruin that kid's life. Alex Jones should have done that a long time ago. Instead of apologizing, he had the wherewithal to do that when everybody was calling him racist and saying he didn't say that he'd said nobody died at Sandy Hook when he never did. He was very careful about it, even when he had Wolfgang on there. But instead of saying, hey, look, there are some questions there, unfortunately, he's now apologizing all over the place. And
he's got to pay his bills. He's got to keep his lights on, and all those guys, so that's what it's come down to with that. And again, he's being a shill because he needs to be. He's got to pay his bills. So he's going to go on Joe Rogan. They're going to lick each other's balls for a while, and then they'll go back to they'll creep back into it later when nobody's looking. Then they'll say something a little crazy,
Well, you guys are from the wrestling world. I mean, does Alex Jones have a WWE personality or what? I mean, he would be perfect as a manager or something.
They're paying him, and he shows up. He does his role, and that's it.
You're making profit on that. You're going to sign Alex Jones beforehand. Don't do that. Just a little trivia, too. You can go next, Papa. A little trivia on this. Right. We have a debate that if there was a time machine, Don, that I would go back and save JFK from being assassinated. Papadon chose to go back and work in the 80s in a local wrestling promotion. So JFK would be dead if he had access to time travel. Go ahead, Papadon. Defend yourself.
Okay.
So we got some correlations with what Don was saying with Sandy Hook and all the stuff that went down in Parkland and all this other stuff, right? Right to the way schools are being managed and controlled right now, because that's what they use as justification for the way they're treating the schools now. Like when we were talking about jails, that they assimilate prisons, man, there's literally bars on the windows, right? I have 2 kids in school right now, right? So I got to deal with this. And a lot of the stuff that Papa Don said was absolutely on point. I experienced this, 2 different kids, 2 different grade levels. I experienced the same things with them, a very leftist, very pro-leftist agenda, teaching my kids about stuff that they shouldn't be teaching. I have to re-educate them when they come to school, when they come home. And I wish I could homeschool. I don't have the luxury of doing that. Yeah. Another thing is we spoke about education a ton. There's no education going on in these schools. There is zero education. And that goes not just at an elementary and high school level. That goes on to the college level. This is all a bunch of nonsense. Yeah. There's nothing about that. Nobody retains anything. Nobody uses anything. You just work to get a grade, and after you get that grade, you forget everything, and then you move on, you get another grade, and you get a piece of paper that says you can go to work. And then when you go to college, you make you get into fraternities, you make connections, and boom, that's how you move up and do different things. There's no learning going on. What's up?
Okay, I was actually just before I came on, I was talking with my wife, and she was telling me about one of her friends, her hairdresser, her son is going to Atlanta, actually. So he's in Atlanta. He's graduating.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, he is a neurophysicist. He's got some shit going on, like super brainy kid. Like this kid's a genius. He's graduating, and the corporation who has already hired him is moving him directly to Chicago after graduation. So now just think about what Billy's saying. If that kid, he graduates and then they're going to give him a summer off to do anything, no. They want him to keep that shit that he's learned, the stuff he's wrote his thesis about, the stuff he's done his papers on. They keep it fresh, and now they move him directly into that sector. They got him in that professional sector as a physicist or whatever they're using him for. There is no time to forget any of the stuff he just learned.
Well, I'm guessing he might have been part of the gifted and talented world. That's another aspect of these schools now. If you read Brave New World from Aldous Huxley, we're very close to what was happening there, where people were being divided into alphas and betas and omegas at birth. About, hey, where are you going to go in life? Because this GT program, the gifted and what does it say? As I try to make people understand, what does that say to all the other kids who aren't gifted and talented? You can't help but think I'm not gifted and talented. Because everyone knows who they go to special classes, and now a 4.0 grade point average doesn't necessarily even mean that much. It's not that impressive because you're taking all these advanced courses. And I write in Bullyocracy about, I quote teachers on how most of the advanced courses are bogus. They don't teach anymore, but they're there for a show. They're a label, and they help these kids that have a 4.25 grade point average. And that distinguishes them from your standard 4.0, which means nothing anymore to the good schools. And as I wrote in Survival of the Richest, only 3% of college students, of the top 146 colleges as rated by pretty much everyone, by the educational world, come from the bottom quarter income-wise. And you can bet that virtually all of that 3% are basketball and football players. There's virtually no students, so the college system shows the inequity that we face where there's no upward mobility. And the people that are going to, you can go to your community college, you can go to your state university, get a student loan, which of course is another conspiracy, and you're going to be saddled with an average of $32,000 worth of debt. You're going to get a crappy job that used to be go to high school degree people. Now they're just requiring college degrees for these crappy jobs so they can give you something when you get out of college. And I knew people that are in their 50s that are still paying off their student loan. That's when the student loans weren't as bad as they are now. The people today that are getting them, they're going to be worse than mortgages. They'll take longer to pay off. And it's a disgrace because they're not getting their money's worth, except, again, the people at the very top. You go to medical school, law school, if you go into one of those big, in which case you probably come from a wealthy background and you won't need a student loan to begin with. Yeah. But for the rest of the people, it's like everything else.
It's enslavement. It's enslavement.
Yes,
That's
Ben
what it is.
Here. Ben would be screaming and yelling and cursing up the storm right now.
Right. He's a college professor, right?
Yeah, he's got his own bills on this one. Loans.
It's straight up enslavement is what it is. It's all a Ponzi scheme. It's a freaking scam, straight up and down. But regardless of that, even when we're talking about the gifted children, right? The people that are gifted, that they separate, there's nothing gifted about it. All it is that you can regurgitate what the system is giving you better than the other one.
Whoa.
Absolutely.
Papa Don, back me up. I was in Miss Eskenazi's gifted and talented class in 4th, 5th, and 6th grade. And what we did, we went into, and this is no joke. Do you remember up in the office, and this is Papa Don was in the same school. This was up, we had a separate room in the back of the school that was by actually the special ed room. Remember the special ed room, which was a giant metal door with screens on it. And in that room beyond that was a special room for the gifted and talented where we would go in and we would kind of brainstorm about stuff. And that's what we did. And we would get taken out of a class, at 1:30 for a half hour, 45 minutes worth of brainstorming or drawing or doing whatever we wanted to do because we were in G&T. What
happened 50 years ago? Let's look at it. What happened 50 years ago when there was no G&T? There were no LDs, learning disabled. There were sometimes the slow kids. It was politically incorrect. But you didn't have 1 out of 10 kids on the autism. You didn't even hear of autism.
Yeah,
that's another story. There's no spectrum. Now, almost every millennial I've known has some kind of Asperger's or something.
Right.
They just, it's created a whole different generation because these kids are not, first of all, they're plugged into the matrix. They're online. Although I'm online more than I've told somebody the other day, I said, I'm not used to not being online. I actually like that world better most of the time. But, that's where they are. That's where they meet and form relationships. A lot of time they just have cyber romances where they don't even meet the people. This is the reality that they are, not to mention the kids that are just completely antisocial and spend all their time playing video games. And that's their entire world. So, but we've created that because the opportunities, again, 50 years ago, even there were still opportunities for anyone. You had factories so that people that weren't GT, that weren't, maybe even a bit below average intellectually wise, they could go to a factory. They could work an assembly line. They had strong unions, and they made good money. They made a great living. The cities like Detroit prospered because of all the factories that were there. And what happened to all those people? They're still there. They just don't. I tell the story. I know a guy that worked as a Safeway cashier, grocery store in the early 1980s. He was making the equivalent. He was making $17 an hour then, which is the equivalent of $112,000 today as a cashier at a grocery store. That same grocery store exists. They pay less than $10 an hour now. So that right there kills the argument when people generally say, well, you raise the wage, the price of the product's going to go up. Well, no. Food was lots cheaper in the early 80s, yet somehow this big company was able to pay its employees that kind of money. So, and lots of examples. Circuit City, the big electronics that used to exist. I knew people that were making in the 30s, $30,000 and more in the mid 80s, which is again is equivalent to over $100,000 a year now.
Wow.
It's because they paid commission to their salesmen, and then they stopped paying commission, and they started paying them, $8 an hour, $10 an hour, or whatever. So we see that all over, and no one else is talking about this. And look at the difference 50, 60 years ago, where any job, a mother didn't have to work. They could stay home literally and bake cookies like you saw on TV. They really did that. That's what mothers did back then. Whether it was right or wrong, that's what they did. Fathers went out to work at Sears, Montgomery Ward's, Woodward and Lothrop, places like that don't exist anymore. They could just go and do a job that they claim now only an immigrant can do, only a teenager can do, and will pay them nothing. Well, they used to pay them a living wage because they used to stand behind the counter and they had respect. They might dress in a suit, and you didn't really think that, gosh, that my dad may be a bank president and his dad works behind the counter at Sears, but you didn't really feel they were all that different. Now there's such a distinction between first of all, CEO is not going to be commiserating with anybody that works in a store, but it's things have changed so much, and I think someone needs to talk about that, but nobody but me, it seems like, is talking about it.
Actually, we talk about it every week, and
okay.
We
Me and Billy Ray.
He didn't say he was a big fan of the show. He didn't lie, so.
That's fine. That's fine. Not step on your toes here, but the whole premise of what you're talking about right now, it all comes down to division. A house divided can't stand. Right. They want us to be divided between the 1% and the poor. They don't want a middle class. They don't want a gray area. They want a black and white, not race section. Just giving an analogy here. They want a binary system in place where either you're on one side of the fence or the other, and then whatever the case may be, you're the 1%, you're looking down at people saying we can't affiliate with the people on the bottom level of Titanic while we're on the upper deck, and the people on the bottom of the Titanic or on the other side of the fence, they're looking up saying these greedy bastards, they don't want to share. Yeah. So that's why our world is where we're at right now, and there's a lot of things that come into play. Education is definitely one thing. You said, autism coincidentally 50 years ago was not even heard of. Peanut allergies, all these things weren't heard of 50 years ago. But who benefits from this now? The big pharma. Right. Who's the biggest lobbyists and donators in Washington? Big pharma. Coincidence? I don't think so. It all comes down to making money, and it all comes down to the root of evil, which is greed and the U.S. dollar And on top of that, the U.S. dollar is fictional within itself because it's a fiat currency based on lies and manipulation and based on the Federal Reserve, making money off of debt and leveraging their money 10 to 1. And, now you're getting me started. I'm sorry. I'm right.
Well, he was quiet. It was building up. I knew it was coming. Go ahead.
Well, no, you're exactly right. The Fed,
right on point.
Henry Ford said a long time ago, people understood our banking system, there'd be a revolution tomorrow. I try to tell people all the time, but I think they don't believe it's true. But I say, look, this is the way our fractional banking system works. You only have to have a fraction of whatever you loan on hand. And I think it's less than 10% now, but let's say it's just 10%. That means for every $10 you actually have, you can loan 100. I said, who wouldn't want that? Wouldn't you? I mean, your buddy says, hey, you have $100. Well, I'll give you 10, but you owe me 100 plus interest. So 90% of the principal is imaginary and doesn't exist. 100% of the principal is imaginary and doesn't exist. So you couldn't call in all these bogus loans if you want to. And what every bank does every day in this country is indistinguishable from counterfeiting, and anybody that is serving time in prison for counterfeiting should be pardoned, because they're not doing anything different than what banks do every day as standard business practice.
No, that's legal. That's legal stuff. We it's two different things. These people have to go to jail. Bankers are cool. They can do whatever they want. Listen, one thing there, right? You said that they didn't that people don't believe, right? That they don't believe in the fractional reserve. Most people don't even care, right? They just don't care. They don't even know it's a thing. So they just
know.
No, hold on. It's not they don't care, they don't listen. It's human nature is to fear the unknown. They don't know. So it's easier for them to get back in line, put their head down, now look up and realize, you know what? I'm in my lane. I'm accustomed to what I'm doing. I'm in my routine. You can't teach an old dog new tricks. And that is embedded within us from birth. Through the systems that we go through, education, to the workforce, to hanging out with your friends, to the propaganda on television on a daily basis. It conditions us. It puts us in a certain space mentally and physically. And that's why we are who we are and when we are, because that's how they want it to be.
I think you're giving people more credit than they deserve, to be honest with you. Not to put anyone down. I'm there right along with you. Okay. When I'm speaking about this, I'm speaking about myself for a long time.
I heard him say, go fuck yourself, Papa Don.
That's exactly what I said.
Well,
I said it subliminally.
It's normalcy bias too, because most people, J. Edgar Hoover of all people described that he was talking about the communist conspiracy, but it applies to anything where he said the average person doesn't want to confront the reality of what he's faced with. No one wants to face, if you tell somebody the banking system, first of all, who are they going to trust? You or the people at NBC and the New York Times and Goldman Sachs? They're going to think you're crazy, especially when you're talking about all this other stuff, JFK, 9/11, whatever that people like me are talking about. So you're not going to have any credibility in their eyes, no matter what you're saying. And that you could get them, hey, call up the Federal Reserve in New York or whatever, and ask them, is this true? First of all, they're not going to do that. But even if they did, I think they probably still would be stunned, because normalcy bias is so strong. They don't want to, especially if they're people, you can get a lot more response from people who average blue collar workers, people that are struggling. Yes, they'll understand it. They know the system's rigged, and they know the man's holding everybody down and all that. So they have it right in a way. They understand the gist of what's going on. But anybody that's successful, they don't want to go there, because they don't want to look, man, everything's fine for me. And that's all people care about. They don't care about anyone else.
Yeah.
They still, a few years ago, the guy dropped dead in Target, and everybody stepped over his body on Black Friday. Nobody even bothered to render him. They just, like he wasn't there. That's what our society is now. We don't have any empathy. We just care about looking out for number one. That was the bestseller in the 1980s for a reason. It impacted a lot of people, because that's what people do. They look out for number one.
Yeah,
it goes back to school. Go ahead, Steve. Go ahead.
I was going to say, but the truly shocking thing is, and we can get into that, good segue, I think, you talk about in 9/11, you talk about other supposed conspiracies that have been proven to not be what the government said. The most notable two is the Gulf of Tonkin incident and the JFK assassination. It's come out pretty much, this is not what the government said. There was a conspiracy. There was multiple people involved. The Gulf of Tonkin incident never happened and caused 57,000 plus Americans to lose their lives. If that's not going to shake people, that's why I always say, on a side note, if a UFO landed on everybody's front doorstep, they'll be like, cool, what's on TV? Like,
Yeah, well, you're right. Yeah, and the Gulf of Tonkin, just kind of an aside, just for do you want to get into kind of the deeper down the rabbit hole? The admiral in charge of the Gulf of Tonkin was the father of Jim Morrison of the Doors. He was an admiral. He was in charge of the Gulf of Tonkin. So that's the kind of crazy connections you find here. But even before that, there was Operation Northwoods, which JFK vetoed to his everlasting credit. Joint Chiefs of Staff all approved it. People that make fun of us for talking about crisis actors and fake events and hoaxes, the CIA came up with Operation Northwoods, which was a huge hoax. You're talking about they wanted to, I don't know how many people they were actually going to kill, but they were going to fake plane crashes. They were going to have fake shootings. And some people, it's unclear whether they were actually going to kill people. But however you look at it, they were doing all this as a psyop to try to frame Cuba and blame Cuba for everything so that we could go back to war with Cuba. So luckily JFK was the only sane one in the room, and it's one of the many reasons they killed him. But for people that talk about but the CIA at the same time, I mean, you talk about things that are psyops. They were planning at one point to have a fake second coming of Christ. They were talking about trying to superimpose the figure of Christ with some kind of whatever projection equipment they had at the time.
Stevie, what year were you born, Stevie?
Beat me to it.
There you go. Off the shores of Cuba, and they knew that the Cuban population was largely Catholic, and that let's say most people would if they suddenly saw a giant image of Christ in the sky. I mean, a lot of us would, wow, especially in early 1960s. So this is what they were doing when they weren't dosing people with LSD and running a whorehouse and all the other crazy stuff, all on our dime, all on the tax dollar, but. You're not supposed to talk about that, and nowadays, we're supposed to. In the era of Trump, a lot of these leftists. One of my many arguments, whether their ranting was, well, who are you going to trust, Vladimir Putin or our intelligence agencies? And I'm saying, look, I know what our intelligence agencies have done. I don't trust them. Vladimir Putin, hey, he's against GMO foods. He's banned all the Rothschilds from entering Russia. He's publicly said that your government killed JFK, so he sounds better than most of our politicians.
Sounds like you should be on the show tonight.
Yet. No, but seriously, you have a very valid point as far as the CIA and any of the intelligence agencies. They're all shady. I mean, put it this way. Was it a year ago? Maybe 2 years ago? I don't know the exact date. Comey comes on TV and for 15 minutes does a spiel. The first 10 minutes of his spiel, he says how Hillary Clinton, with the emails and everything that she did, how bad how guilty she is and how she broke the law. And then the last 5 minutes, look over here, don't look over there. We're not going to prosecute her because we believe she did it without a malicious intent. She wasn't trying to hurt anybody. And that's it.
It's the 5-year-old saying, I didn't mean to. That's what it was.
Yeah, exactly. Even symbolically, somebody at Hillary Clinton's level of actually being held accountable under the law would mean so much symbolically. And that's why so many, while the chant of lock her up, and that's never going to happen under Trump, obviously, but that's why so many people were hoping, because of this rhetoric that Trump had, that he would be draining the swamp and locking, because it needs to be drained, obviously, and these criminals need to be locked up. But when you have things like the Podestas, and I posted yesterday on Facebook, there was another mysterious death of the journalist, I think he was from the UK, who first linked the Podesta brothers, who have been linked to everything, lots of strange artwork, Pizzagate, pedophile stuff. Very strange stuff. They had linked the Podesta brothers to the suspect description in the Madeleine McCann disappearance, one of the most famous toddlers that disappeared, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago, maybe a little less than that.
Was that in South America?
I think so. I can't remember exactly the details, but he was 4 years old, and it got a lot of publicity. But this guy put out he was the one who wrote an article about comparing the Podesta's appearance and their background to the original sketch artists, I guess, of the people who'd seen them. Well, this guy just died. They found him in blood all over his house or something and claimed he killed himself. He was an alcoholic. But that's what happens all the time. And the same day, yet another guy that was actually served under Obama and Clinton both supposedly killed himself. And somebody said,
all these guys are going. All these guys are, committing suicide, catching colds and dying. Something's going down, and I think tying that into, like, going into New Zealand, is that a false flag for something coming up? Is that covering up for something else?
That's what people always say. Is this going to be the big one? Is this that? I mean,
I don't even think it has to be a big one.
Yeah,
I think they're okay with doing kind of mediocre ones. Small ones are fine because they're doing the fucking job.
Well, they don't. And I really think it's a game with these people at this point, because if you look, go back to the JFK assassination, and I'm not saying the JFK assassination was a false flag, but the things, I think they leave what I call calling cards. It took me forever. I mean, I've been studying the JFK case forever, but it took me a long time to realize, hey, when I'm talking about the magic bullet, Commission Exhibit 399, found rolling off a stretcher in Parkland Hospital, that caused 7 non-fatal wounds supposedly in 2 people and came out looking in pristine condition. I never thought to myself, well, what kind of conspirators? Because of course we're assuming these are powerful conspirators. They're connected to intelligence and the government, the military, whatever. Why would you plant a bullet that looks like it hadn't hit anything? When you plant a bullet that looked like it had struck something, I think that was a calling card. And I think on 9/11, similarly, with the passport, that was a calling card, because and I think they do this on purpose. And I think that's why in the gay nightclub, they can have the footage of the guys dancing around and celebrating. They can have the guy, David Hogg, at Parkland, interviewing somebody in a closet during the shooting. They can have obvious what looks like mannequins, and several. There was one, I think it was in California. I don't know if you guys saw that years ago, where the guy was like wheeling a supposed victim. I mean, it was an obvious mannequin. LAX, yeah. I mean, but you sound crazy to say that, but that's what it was. I'm sorry, but I think they do it on purpose because they know that the vast majority of people are still asleep. And I think they do this to half entertain themselves, but I think they do it to just kind of stick their tongues out like kids and say, yeah, we did it. So what? And we're making it obvious to you guys. They're winking at us, because I don't know what else that would be, because to me they could be more sophisticated and they could create obviously some good conspiracies, but they don't. And I think they do it because
I brought up the picture, by the way, Don. It's up on Twitch right now. You can clearly see it's a mannequin that's in the wheelchair.
Yeah.
Put it up on the feed.
And then, like what Billy Ray was, Stevie was talking about, was it before on air? I don't remember. You saw the video where the bullet casings in New Zealand from the first-person shooter angle was just disappearing midair. Now, is that Billy? Is that something where the source of that video? Like, you could say, I know that's a video from this, or I just found it on the internet. Like, I don't know. I wasn't. Didn't get too much into it.
It's the actual video, from whatever I can tell. I got 2 different copies of the video, and the same thing is shown. Jim Fetzer sent it to me, right?
So,
go ahead.
No, I was saying, and you can clearly see that the casings never hit the floor.
There's yes, and it's in one particular scene. All right, because I don't know much about guns, man, but some people that do went and looked at this, and I got conflicting reports. But in one scene, he's outside. He's shooting down the sidewalk randomly, down one sidewalk, down the other sidewalk, and you see the shell casings pop off and literally merge into a column, like a cement column. It just goes in there and disappears. It's the weirdest thing I've ever seen. But besides that, there's tons of other, because this is something that we can argue back and forth forever and never come to a conclusion on. There's some stuff that's kind of like hard, evidence that something is different from what we're being told with this guy. I forget his name. Trent something or other. The shooter. I forget his name. No, but this dude had been to Pakistan. He'd been to New Zealand. To North Korea, to Turkey. All right, just 45 days he spent in Turkey. This guy. Who gets to do that? Just randomly go all over the world. That immediately hit me off, thinking that there was some type of intelligence connection there. The guy's all over the place, right? Then there's the manifesto. That's a calling card, like the passport on 9/11. Yeah. Everybody has a manifesto.
Everybody has a manifesto.
Right.
Gotta keep it done.
You got to do it. And then the video itself in New Zealand is illegal to possess.
Yes.
They're prosecuting a kid right now, 18 years old. He faces 10 years in prison in New Zealand for distributing that video. What's the big deal, right? Then you turn and look at the video and there's some questionable stuff going on, right? Then they report that there were several cars that were laced with bombs, not one,
Right.
but several that they defused. Then they went back and corrected that, but they've also gone back and scrubbed everything from Sandy Hook and everything from everything else. So this is the calling card, right? The initial reports is what you go on, and then they correct it, right? So believe it if you want, don't believe it if you want, go do your own research, but this is what was put out there initially. The cars, several were laced with explosives right outside the mosque. There are 4 people that were in custody. 3 men, 1 woman. Don't know what the hell is happening to them. They're saying that it's a lone shooter. That's another calling card of this whole deal.
Yes, always alone. Well, and again, is this how is it? I think there's a game to see how obvious they can. And I don't think. I literally think they could turn to the screen and say, "Yeah, this is fake, 100% fake. We hoaxed it." And I still think probably the majority of Americans would accept it because it's just that's how asleep they are, and that's the problem. People, especially me, I'm writing about history. We talked about the school system. If they're not learning math or anything else, they don't know the first thing about history. And the problem is they don't even know the fake history, the establishment history. So if I'm trying to tell them about the Kennedy assassination or something, they don't even know the fairy tale of this. So to try to show them how it's a lie, you have to first be able to show them the myth. And you can't even do that. I mean, Americans are by and large historically illiterate now. They know nothing about their history, and if you don't, was it Orwell said, he who controls the future controls the past, he who controls the present controls the future, or something like that. But that's what we need to remember is that history is very important, or that we're condemned to repeat it. As Santayana said.
That's YouTube and Google and everything else getting scrubbed over the past couple of years. Shadow.
What do you think? Why do you think they're tearing down all the statues and everything that's involved with slavery?
Yep.
Because if it's not around, people are not going to ask questions, and when they become exactly, and when we become enslaved 5-10 years from now, not physically in chains, hopefully not. I know Big Ray's into that type of stuff, but that's another story.
Pays extra for that shit.
Of course, that's Michael Jackson, but they're not going to have anything to know about, because if they don't know their history, they are doomed to repeat it. So if no history is being presented about slavery, they're going to get enslaved again. Yeah. I mean, that's that simple. But let me ask you a quick question. You're a big expert on JFK. I mean, we all know, the 4 of us all know about JFK very well as well. What's your take on how many people were in the car? What do you recall officially and initially in the JFK car?
Well, you had the 2 Secret Service agents who weren't doing their job, like none of them were. You had Greer, the driver, who hated JFK. And, people, my friend Vince Panorama talked to his son, and he said, well, JFK was Catholic, and he kind of chuckled. And Greer did not he wasn't the regular driver either. And he actually, most people think he stopped the limousine. He certainly slowed down at the sound of gunfire, which is not their training. Roy Kellerman was sitting next to him. He was supposed to jump back and throw his body on JFK at the first sign of, and that's what LBJ's man, Rufus Youngblood, did at the sign of gunfire. He did his job because LBJ wasn't supposed to die. So Kellerman did not do his job. And then you had in the jump behind them, in the jump seat, you had Governor John Connally, who was also hit in the assassination attempt, and his wife Nellie, and then in the back seat you had JFK and Jackie. So you had 6 people in the car, and unfortunately what happens in all these cases, because the case doesn't get invested, you have a lot of people. There's a whole school out there that thinks that Greer, the driver, turned around and shot JFK. Now I think that's absurd, but it's probably no more absurd than saying, or not as absurd as saying Oswald did it alone. We know that's impossible. But all these cases, they invite speculation, because all of us out here, even I like to think of myself as a responsible researcher, and I don't speculate too much. Like people talked about hidden history, and I said, find a theory in there. I'm just telling you, these things happen. That's not a theory. They happened. I laid out all the minutiae in the JFK assassination, the best parts of it that I thought proved conspiracy. And I said, that's not a theory. This is a fact. There were reports of bullets being found in the grass. There was a guy pumping an umbrella, the umbrella man, next to the limousine on a sunny day. And that kind of that these things were there, and so you have to see. There was a babushka woman. There was a lady there in a Russian scarf. They called her babushka lady, who was filming the assassination right next to the limo. Would have been the best footage, much better than Abraham Zapruder's was. Nobody's they've never found her. No, they never found her footage. That she still hasn't been. She's my friend on Facebook, Beverly Oliver. I'm not convinced she's the babushka lady. She may be, maybe, I don't know. But at any rate, her film is gone. But that's what happens in all these cases. That there's no journalists, and that's the worst part of all this. If we had a free press, this corruption couldn't exist because they would expose it, but they don't. They don't expose any of it.
Do you believe the Zapruder film was altered? Do you think it's legit, or you think it was edited?
Well, yeah, and obviously Jim Fetzer, your buddy, he's one of the main proponents that it was altered. I got
That's why I'm asking.
I got many of those debates, but yeah, I don't think it's. I think at the very least it was tampered with. We know there were frames missing, and yeah, it has a cartoonish quality to it. A lot of it does, and I think there's at one point that I believe. Greer turns his head at it's humanly impossible. He turns his head so fast, it's absolutely impossible. And there's another part that I was taken I think the best guy in this was Jack White, who died unfortunately died right before Hidden History came out. I know he would have loved my book. He was a great guy. He was a big, we never went to the moon guy too. He was great at 9/11. Yeah, he was an early 9/11 guy too. He was really a great guy. He was in his 80s, but he had analyzed the film and he talked to it. I was really impressed with this. There's a whole very few spectators, and that's one thing most people don't question about the Kennedy assassination. If you watch the entire footage of the parade, you'll see that the spectators are lined up 3 and 4 deep everywhere, except for Dealey Plaza. When they turn into the kill zone, there's only scattered spectators there, and I question that. Why weren't some of those people that were in the 4th row a street over? Why didn't they run over there? They knew the motorcade was going there to get a better view. Was somebody keeping them out of there or what? But so the scattered spectators, there were about 20 or 25 or group or so at one point where Jack White analyzed this and he said, look, there's a period of, I think it's 2 or 3 seconds where no one moves in that group. No one moves at all. Again, humanly impossible. So I don't think the Zapruder film is I don't know how much it was altered, and I don't think it's that important because really there's evidence and we've used the Zapruder film for so many years as evidence of conspiracy because we see JFK's head go back when Oswald was behind him. So, I'm not sure. I don't think it's the most important thing. And I think, unfortunately, that's those kind of debates. And Fetzer he was great at doing it, where you would get swamped in those kind of things. And I think I prefer not to lose sight of the big picture, which is the crime was never investigated by anyone. In any authoritative body, and no professional journalists outside of a few reporters like Jim Mars in Texas investigated it all. The rest of the mainstream media sat on it and bought the official story, and they still do to this day.
I don't think many people will actually be able to sit through the entire Oliver Stone movie since it's 3+ hours. The attention span of people. I teach a course
on that. I actually show the film. Believe it or not, my adult education program in my county lets me teach a course on Oliver Stone's JFK. So
wow.
When I get a handful of kids in there, handful of kids. They're always older than me. It's always an old crowd, but I sit there and analyze it, and we watch it, and I know that film inside out.
So would you say that probably, because I was about to recommend, if you're going to watch anything from the movie, watch the Mr. X episode.
Yes.
His monologue tells the entire story, and from the paper already having it on the other side of the world, I think in Australia, all these things just pretty much summed it up. So if you have... God, if it's gotten to the point where you can't even take 5 minutes to pay attention to something, we're all in trouble. But would you do you agree that would be probably a good part for people to watch?
I think it's great, especially for young people, because it is entertaining, even though the director's cut is over 3 hours, but it's done so well. And you're right, Mr. X was based on a real character, Fletcher Prouty, who was a member of the former Joint Chiefs of Staff, and he talked about, I think it was in New Zealand, where he claimed he got the news of that ahead of time, and he later became more and more conspiratorial oriented, and later he ended up sitting on the board of directors for Liberty Lobby, which published The Spotlight, which became American Free Press, and I now write regularly for the American Free Press. So people can read my articles there if they get that.
So in your expertise, who do you think is behind the JFK assassination? Obviously, it's not Lee Harvey Oswald. Who do you, from your findings and from your due diligence, who do you think is behind it?
Well, I think, what has come to be known as the deep state, whether you want to call them the Illuminati or what, the people that run everything, I think the orders to kill came from a very high level. Although I think Oliver Stone gets it essentially right. I think it kind of ends up being something in the wind, and the people in the Pentagon that want him dead, the people in the CIA that want him dead, kind of coalesce together. And if you wanted two conspirators, I mean, I prefer to say I really don't know the names of the actual assassins or anything, and they probably were eliminated early on, I would imagine. But I think two figures that definitely were conspirators beforehand at ground level would be, besides the Secret Service itself, which I think was told to stand down, and I believe Emory Roberts, who was in charge of the detail that day in Dallas. He was not normally in charge, but you can see him if you see the famous footage at the airport of the guy, the Secret Service agent shrugging like, what's going on, what's up, when he's being told he's being waved off, jogging beside the limousine, which these Secret Service agents did regularly. You can see he's surprised. So he wasn't in on it. I believe that agent was Henry Ripka, and I actually became the first researcher to contact his family when my friend William Law, who worked with me, and talked to Henry Ripka's son, and we had the result of the entire conversation in the book, or the gist of the conversation. Basically, you could tell he was all flustered by it because people had managed not, because Ripka died very young. And now even my friend Vince Panorama, who's done great work on the Secret Service, thinks that was actually a guy named Don Lawton. But I believe it was Ripka. I believe he was out of the loop. You can catch him doing that. And later, Emory Roberts, who was in charge of that backup car. Now, keep in mind, you had 6 agents there that were right behind, 10 feet or less from JFK's limousine. They did not react at all during that 6 seconds or so of gunfire. Clint Hill ran belatedly after the damage had been done and jumped onto the back, where Jackie Kennedy pretty much pulled him in, and saved him. But he's the only one that belatedly reacted, and Emory Roberts is said to have stopped one of the agents who wanted to react. Now, a lot of people speculate that they were actually told, that the agents were told that there was going to be a simulated assassination attempt, and that maybe JFK wasn't taking things seriously, or this was a drill. And these guys folled orders, especially in 1963. So that's possible.
It's the same playbook, just like with 9/11, with the stand down on everything. It's the same thing. They're using the same tactics: the passport, the magic bullet, the stand down orders, everything.
You find this over and over again. Then McGeorge Bundy, you want a conspirator named McGeorge Bundy, who was the national security advisor at JFK, his Henry Kissinger type. He was in the White House Situation Room at the time. Now, I don't see how, and now keep in mind, before the assassination, one of the main reasons JFK, I believe, was assassinated was National Security Action Memorandum 263, which delineated the withdrawal plans from Vietnam. First 1,000 troops are going to be out by the end of 1963, all troops out by 1965. This was so anybody that's Noam Chomsky types on the left, gatekeepers, whose books are financed by the military, by the way, or were any of those early ones, and he's supposedly an anti-military guy. But these guys that claim nothing changed, that JFK would have done the same thing, LBJ, and that's bullshit. It's complete bullshit, and it's contradicted by National Security Action Memorandum 263. But what's important is that the day of the assassination, that's when the draft was dated, McGeorge Bundy drafted a new National Security Action Memorandum 273, which completely changed JFK's new plans to withdraw from Vietnam, and basically paved the way for escalation. Now, he had to have known. Of course, JFK never saw it because he was assassinated that day, and McGeorge Bundy was back in Washington, D.C. He had to have known JFK would have never signed it because it contradicted what his recent plans. So I believe this clearly, again, was a calling card, and it took researchers a while, obviously. And to top that, McGeorge Bundy in the White House Situation Room assured JFK's cabinet. Now, they were all curiously out of the country. They were all flying actually to Hawaii for a conference at the time. And we're still trying to get those some of those radio transmissions of the communications that went back and forth between Air Force One that day and also between this cabinet and the White House Situation Room. But we do know that McGeorge Bundy told them, assured them, within a couple hours of the assassination, before Oswald had even been arrested, maybe he'd been arrested, but there was nothing known about him at all. No investigation had been conducted. He assured them there was no conspiracy. Now, this is a guy sitting in a White House situation in Washington, D.C., who had just written a fake memorandum that he knew JFK would never sign. So you want a conspirator? I don't normally like to say someone, but I feel very confident that McGeorge Bundy was a conspirator. Emory Roberts was a conspirator. Beyond that, it's obviously the power structure, and then the J. Edgar Hoover and the rest of them went into overdrive on the cover-up. But I think that's more important. I think is to point out that, because the names change in these things. I mean, you go to 9/11, it's obviously a whole different group. Then you have the Dick Cheneys and Rumsfelds and stuff. We don't know who's over them. Those are the people that are orchestrating things that we can see. But there can be Rothschild types, shadowy figures above them that we're not privy to.
Well, there's a Bush connection from JFK over to 9/11. So we can make the argument that they're still the same people, just a new generation of the same people, right? Because they say that Bush had some type of involvement in the JFK assassination. I don't know if we probably talked about this, but I don't remember off top.
Well, it's George Herbert Walker Bush, who was at the time a pretty young guy.
Doesn't remember where he was, though.
Yeah, he doesn't remember where he was. That's suspicious. He and Richard Nixon and a few others. But but there's a photograph there that a lot of people think was Bush. I mean, it's the same. A lot of people tried to. In another incident, the only one that really wrote about for a long time was the death of JFK Jr. A lot of people have tried to tie the Bushes to that as well. I don't think it's like a warring crime families. I think that's kind of superficial, and I think that. And Bush, especially in 1963, he may have been privy about it. I don't know how many people in the CIA knew about it. I tend to think it was probably just the hierarchy or people that, the Alan Dulles types that were, I think he's another mover and shaker probably behind the assassination, but he'd been fired by JFK. So he technically wasn't with the CIA then, but I'm sure he still had lots of power and influence. But Bush was very young then. I'm not sure he would have been an elite insider. He may have known something. Just as later on, I don't think JFK Jr. was knocked off simply just because the Bushes ordered it or the Clintons ordered it or whatever. I mean, I think that was done because he was a Hamlet type of thing. That they knew, as I discovered, that he had a quest behind the scenes to find out who killed his father, alone among the Kennedys, and he was working to do that.
Well, it seems like it's a.
Guys, Stevie.
I was going to say, it would seem to me like very mafia type stuff where maybe George Bush, that might have been, George Bush Sr. there in Dallas, Texas might have been his initiation, so to say. Is this kid going to play ball? Is he going to do it the way throughout history he became,
even more prevalent on and on and on. Yeah. Not only that, he's Skull and Bones, right? And Alan Dulles, which you mentioned, is also Skull and Bones. So I mean, you can make that
John
correlation
Kerry,
there.
There's tons.
All those people were all the head of the CIA was pretty much created by Skull and Bones. So you can make an argument that is the upper echelon, right? It started in 1832, I think. Skull and Bones. I forget.
And that was JFK's speech. That was one of the most famous parts of the speech. Was the secret societies might have really pissed them off that he kind of put it out there.
Well, he made so many. I mean, he's, I think of the greatest speech ever delivered by any president was his June 1963 speech at American University, where he talked about peace, and he's the first president ever to not demonize whatever the boogeyman of the moment was. And he talked about the Russians breathing the same air that we do, of loving their children. He treated them as humans. Can you imagine any American leader talking about whatever the Syrians, the North Koreans, the Russians again now, whoever they're demonizing at the moment, the Iraqis, we would never do that. Instead, we're treated to the same propaganda. And my book is coming out in June, where I talk about the early crimes. We'll go back to, and I'll show how this propaganda hasn't changed since basically 1898, when it was Remember the Maine, to hell with Spain. That kind of thing, where they had a false flag there, where they blew up the Maine and blamed it on Spain so we could go to war with them, Spanish-American War, and we repeated that in Lusitania in World War I. Again, it was proven to be a false flag.
Is there any event that actually happened for real in history? It seems like there is not. It seems
Well, I think obviously real thing, and that's what happens, when you think about the boy that cried wolf, but all these significant events there, and I'll have a whole different take on the Civil War, the war between the states. I mean, I'll talk about all that stuff, and I think that we've been lied to so much, and when you actually go back and look, I mean, just to give you a little bit a flavor about what I'm writing about the Civil War, I document the war crimes of the Union troops, and people don't realize what under Lincoln and his generals, Sherman especially, who was a monster. Sherman and Sheridan, these guys invented what's called the scorched earth policy and the concept of total war. They were the first ones to target civilians, to target women and children and property. They actually looted. I mean, I have a letter from a guy, I think his name was Lynch, who wrote back to his family after the war, and he's all ecstatic. He's talking about the extortion, the theft that went on under Sherman, and Sherman was the big kahuna. He got a cut of everything, and he documents it all about how they stole from all the civilians as Sherman marched to the south, his brave march to the south when he fought nobody really. He fought, there wasn't any troops left, and this guy's considered a heroic figure. He talked about all the jewelry and property and all the raping that went on, all the stuff, and he just matter-of-factly, and then at the end he counsels something like, better not to show this out of the family. Well, fortunately, it came down to us, and we can see those things, but that's the kind of lies, and we're sold these heroes that too often are many times are actual villains, but very often they're not the heroes that we proclaim them to be. And this book, I'm sure, is not gonna make me win me too many friends in powerful circles. But it is what it is. If you write about history honestly, and I call people, just as we have the mainstream media journalists who aren't journalists, we have these historians. I call them the court historians. And they're just currying favor with the powers that be at the moment. And these people have such a vested interest in history continuing to be suppressed that I talked to the great-great-great-great-great-grandnephew of Meriwether Lewis from the Lewis and Clark expedition during the course of this book. They're still blocking the exhumation of his body. Now, you're talking about, over 200 years later because of the fact that it could prove that he was murdered instead of that he committed suicide. Now, what kind of honest government does that? And usually the families control whether a body's exhumed. But in this case, in his case, and in the case of John Wilkes Booth, I talked to several times, his great-great-great-great-grandniece, who we struck up a relationship. They've been frustrated because they can't get his body exhumed because most of these people believe, and I think the evidence shows, that he wasn't killed at Garrett's barn, that he went on to live 20, 30 years, that somebody else died there.
I heard about that.
Yeah, they don't want to, and again, if it's him, why are you blocking it? And I show how in the policy in cemeteries is basically if the family wants it done, it gets done. It's your loved one. But the government, the National Park Service, all these people, the government comes in and blocks when it's a historical figure that could help solve a mystery. Because if that mystery, because what does that say? Let's say if John Wilkes Booth, if it's shown that it's not John Wilkes Booth there, well then all the decades of all the court historians who have come and gone and poo-pooed the conspiracy theorists who said that John Wilkes Booth survived, it makes all of them look ridiculous. And they have so much vested in this. That's just one particular issue. But it's the same thing even with the Kennedy assassination here, that all the people who smeared the conspiracy theorists now, if we could conclusively, for instance, if we could get a zoom in on that 6th floor window where Oswald supposedly was and show that he wasn't there, then they would have so much egg on their face, but they're not going to let that happen because they have so much vested in this, and they've pontificated so much and put themselves above the likes of us. Who are you? They're sneering, talked about people looking down on others. They look down on, you're not a real historian. That's what they would say to me. You're not a real historian.
It ties into, Stevie said earlier about aliens going on, coming down on your lawn. We are in a society of, if you were to show up tomorrow and you were to say, look, I didn't want to put it on the show last night, but look, I have a written confession from Lee Harvey Oswald. I have his bullet. I have his rifle and the notebook that says everybody that was involved. Yeah. And it shows that Lee Harvey Oswald wasn't the shooter. He was there to take the blame. He has all that written down, his handwriting, they would go, Did you? Did you find that? Oh, cool, great.
Or that was a long time ago. Why are you bringing it up now?
Right. Or it would, then we find out that all of a sudden Don Jeffrey's got a really bad cold. And he has to go to the hospital. Where he shot himself 11. Yeah, he shot himself 11 times in the elevator going to the hospital.
And that's unfortunately that's the stuff that we have to deal with. But it would be laughable. But and I think the one purpose I think Trump is the best thing about Donald Trump, the election of Donald Trump, is it really has exposed, regardless of how people feel about him, it has exposed that deep state, because anybody can see the corruption is there. I mean, it's so wide open and so obvious, and the fact nothing's happening there, and we're not gonna get any satisfaction from this sooner or later, because we're running on fumes now as a country. We're turning into a third world country, and I'm fond of pointing out the statistic that bottom half of America now has nothing. They're making less than $27,000, the bottom 50% of Americans, and have less than 1% of the collective wealth. Nothing. And of course, what happens when we talk about immigration so much? Each wave of immigrants that come in, they're almost all poorer than everybody we have here already. So where are they entering? The absolute bottom. So they're making that 50% grow. So in another 20 years, we may have 75% making less than the amount that you can live in a one-bedroom apartment in most areas of this country. You can't have that. 50 years ago, every job paid enough where you could move out of on your own. You could go to an apartment. That's why instead of branding these millennials as snowflakes and all that, it's not their fault. The opportunities aren't there. Rents are sky high, let alone home ownership, and they have no choice a lot of times but to stay in their parents' basements. And I can't really blame them if they're sitting there playing video games. It's probably a much more interesting world than the bleak third world kind of dystopian thing that our leaders have constructed.
You know what, you spoke about Trump and how it exposed the deep state, and it did in a way, but I'm also thinking about if you look at CNN or even Fox News or any of these news outlets, they talk about the deep state like it's a common thing now. Deep state this, the deep state that, the deep state, the deep state. That's just a regular part of the agenda, in my opinion. Look at this QAnon book that came out. We spoke about it off air. It went straight to number one, so quickly. So it's exposed the New World Order or the deep state or whatever the hell you want to call it, right? It's exposed it to a certain degree. But now people think that Trump is fighting this.
Yeah.
Right? When clearly, well, at least in my opinion, right, he's refilling the swamp. He's restocking the swamp. He's not draining anything.
Well, that's the downside, is that Trump has we already, as was mentioned earlier, we are a divided country, and we're being divided by race, and now I guess we're being divided by 57 genders. It wasn't enough between men and women, and now we have the transsexual bathrooms that are at the forefront of every discussion now. But we're being divided but the one division that's not talked about that much, again, is what the kind of stuff I'm talking about, where half the country has nothing, because that's a legitimate concern. Everything else they can get is fighting about, what percent of that 50% is black, or what percent is this group, or whatever, and then you're more concerned about that. No, just like my hero is Huey Long, because Huey Long never played that kind of politics. Huey Long this was in the 1930s in the South. He never talked about race. They can't find a racist statement on the record for him. He talked about the big interests, the Rockefellers, the Morgans, the Harrimans, the big banks. He was the first guy to want the Federal Reserve audited already, 20-some years after it had been created. He was anti-war all the way, but he talked about how the poor were getting screwed by the wealthy, and how the people of this time were taking all the grub off the table and leaving nothing else for the American people. And that's the stuff we have to talk about, instead of being divided about our differences and how we look different. And the powers that be use that. That's why the left, especially, I can't stand it, because they love to,
identity politics. Yeah.
Yeah, they love the identity politics. They love to play against each other. So you get mad about cops killing black people, illegitimate, which of course happens. But the problem is cops killing people when they shouldn't be. That's the problem, not what color they are. But so we lose track of that. And it's very hard because, and Trump being the lightning rod that he is in the middle of all this, you've now got people where it looked like the two-party system might be finally going the way of the dinosaur. Maybe. Now everyone's firmly entrenched. I mean, so many people I love on the left, they're posting memes all the time now. It's no longer about left and right. It's about us against this fucking guy. And they show a picture of Trump. No matter who it is, Beto O'Rourke, Kamala Harris, all these awful candidates they have, except for Tulsi Gabbard. They don't give her too much play because she's the only one that says anything halfway decent, in my opinion. She has a lot of nice Ron Paul anti-war rhetoric type of stuff, but the rest of them are horrible, and they're ready to jump right back. And of course, Trump, as you mentioned, the QAnon people, and I know one of the guys who was involved with writing that book. It's an amazing story, but they are millions of people are watching these QAnon drops, and they don't pay attention to the dates when they say things are going to happen, what's going to happen, because nothing ever happens. But they continue, and I think it's because they're desperate. They're desperate because they know that the evil is there. This deep state is there. Everybody talks about it, like you said, openly. But does Trump look like an unlikely white knight? Yeah, really unlikely. So they're hoping somebody's going to come along and topple them. And I don't see many candidates.
I think part of the work, and I want your guys' thoughts on this also, man, Pop and Big Sal and everybody. I think part of the work started with Cambridge Analytica, Don, really, because Cambridge Analytica, if you guys aren't familiar, right, this has pretty much been branded as British intelligence. Steve Bannon went over there. They started a new company called Cambridge Analytica to mine information from Facebook in order to, sway perception. And they gave Trump certain talking points like build a wall or everything else, the deep state, all of that, fake news, all of this stuff. It had already been simulated by Cambridge Analytica before Trump got it. They were going to give it to Ted Cruz. Ted Cruz fell back. And Bannon brought in Trump. This is all admitted. This isn't conspiracy theory. And they gave him this stuff. And he winked at the conspiracy theorist community, Trump did. He was like, hey, vaccines, we're going to do something about it. We're going to tell the truth about 9/11, and we're going to lock up Hillary Clinton. And of course, none of it happens, but people are holding on to that, hoping that Trump is actually going to get some of this stuff done. They're just waiting. He can't do it now. Because the forces are stopping him. They're stopping him, but he's going to do it eventually. Just wait. Go ahead. Anybody that wants to take that.
Go ahead, Stevie.
I was going to say your friend that you said is not a racist. The left would say that's exactly why he's a racist, because only a racist would not say racist things. But that's kind of like along the lines with the word speak that they use. And also, Billy Ray and I have talked about the alternate theories on the Trump election, saying that they thought the deep state, or whatever you want to call them, they saw that, man, if we put Hillary in there, we're done. We have a very limited amount of time. If we swerve everybody and get Trump in there, we bought ourselves at least 2 election cycles to try to reinstitute or get the agenda pushed forward. Because it really was kind of like an end game where it was clearly like shown that nobody liked Hillary, and it was shown that the fix was in for her. So I think they kind of like switched it around and tried to have this underdog, which would divide people even more, Trump, and get them to where they need to be. I don't know if that's a little off base or not. That's a pro wrestling take on
it. Well, it's, and that's the thing. You guys probably recognize that Trump, and he has some experience in the WWE with Vince McMahon and everything. He has that type of personality, and he fits into this world. I mean, I'm a fan of the movie Idiocracy, and I think we're about 500 years ahead of schedule. But Trump he may not look like President Camacho, but he has that kind of element to him and you don't know how much of this is theatrics, because most of his governing has been on Twitter. And he says some great stuff on Twitter. A lot of them, but then he says it like he's a private citizen and he can't do anything. And then he goes and does the opposite. It's like,
he says these things. Exactly. he says these things on Twitter, and people are like, look, but then he does something completely different.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
And they get excited, and that's he throws red meat. He's throwing red meat to his base, and they get excited. And they also like a lot of the for so long people have thought, boy, they call them cucks, especially these white figures that are in authority that apologize for everything. And Trump was the first white authority figure I've seen in America in a long time that looked like, hey, this guy's not going to apologize necessarily. And he came and he would say bold things, and he would say lots of offensive things too, lots of things I think he needed to apologize for maybe, but there was a refreshing quality to that. I think a lot of people like the fact, hey, he's not backing down like every other white authority figure we've seen will do when it's not necessary because their career is still going to be ruined. So I think there's a lot of element to that where Trump, he tells it like it is, especially on Twitter. He'll say all kinds of, and he got into now he's getting into a big argument with Kellyanne Conway's husband.
Her husband, yeah.
Yeah, and he's getting down, and it's like kids where he just has to get in the last word. I don't know if that's real or if it's a part he's playing or what, but it just makes it. And the fact that he gets distracted by that stuff, whether it's real or not, this is okay. What happened to auditing the Fed? What happened to the Vaccine Autism Commission to be headed by Robert F. Kennedy Jr.? What happened to the infrastructure rebuild? I mean, there's so many things. When I was talking to Roger Stone years ago, Roger Stone contacted me before he really became a household name, and he loved Hidden History. I thought, wow, that's cool. And he ended up writing a foreword to the paperback edition of that. But he told me before Donald, I knew nothing about Trump other than that he just seemed like an obnoxious, brash guy, that was a stupid reality TV star and show I never watched. Like to say you're fired and that kind of thing, but he didn't appeal to me. But Roger Stone said, I've known this guy for 30 years. You would love him. He knows about all the conspiracies. And so I held out hope. I thought, well, it's possible. I guess it's feasible that somebody behind the scenes, a powerater, made a lot of money, succeeded, but didn't like what was going on and, kind of bided his time. And that's the only kind of outsider in the way our American society is structured. It's the only kind of outsider we're ever going to get, a Ross Perot type back in the 90s or a Donald Trump, a renegade billionaire. But as it turned out, obviously Donald Trump seems to have forgotten. I mean, he even something even like Obama's birth thing, which he that's where he first got my attention. Is he actually tweeted out before he ran for president. He pointed out that the woman who produced Obama's pretty much fraudulent birth certificate was the only death fatality in a very mysterious plane crash. Nobody else died but this woman, and he tweeted that out. And I thought, wow, this guy. He seems to know something, but now he's gone, and he's actually bragging about he killed the birther movement. Now it's like, and his base loves it. It's like I don't get it. It's so hard because both sides are really just because the Russian collusion, Trump derangement syndrome people. I can't deal with them at all because they have such personal hatred for him.
Yeah,
and yet the QAnon people. The trust the plan. He's playing 8 million degree chess. Yes, he's naming Elliot Abrams, who's the biggest war hawk ever. He's going to oversee our Venezuela policy. But we're not meddling in foreign affairs. And John Bolton, the biggest war hawk ever, he's going to come in and help us end the wars. It's like he hasn't named a single person to his cabinet who is outside the swamp. So that's the problem I have. But I don't know where an independent person's supposed to go at this point because they're all messed up in my view.
Are you familiar with Dr. David Janda?
Yeah, you've mentioned. I know his name, and I know he has a big following. I tried contacting him a while back. He never responded to my email about trying to be on my show.
All right, we had him on the show here maybe about a month ago, if I'm not mistaken, and he brought up a good point. He feels that Trump is part of the deep state. That there's a split in the deep state. There's the old demigod where Hillary Clinton, the Bushes, and the good old boys on one side, and then you have your other sleeper cell or faction on the other side. That's where Trump's part of, and he's trying to get rid of the old guard to get himself and his boys in order to prosper like the old guard used to prosper, but at the same time masqueraded like he's doing us the favor by helping out the public. So what you're saying, what he said, what's actually happening, in front of our eyes, it's all 1 degree of separation. I mean, because he says A, B, and C to come into office. He hasn't done any of it. Has he done good in the last almost 2 years? Yeah, I think he's done a lot more than what majority of the presidents before him have done. But, he hasn't done what needs to be done. And will he do it? Who knows? He claims he's going after the Fed. I'm still waiting for him to take the Fed out. I don't think it's going to happen. I think the Fed has a better chance of taking him out. We have all these sealed indictments that supposedly are out and about. What happened to all these indictments? We have these envelopes at the Bush's funerals that people are saying, oh, these are all going to jail, whatever the case may be. I mean, there's rumors that even, what's his name? Pence was behind the secret assassination of Trump before he got into office. I mean, who knows what to believe? There's so much, shenanigans going around nowadays, but there is something going on, and that's the bottom line.
I'm having Daniel Estelin on. Every time I announce a guest, it never happens. So there you go.
I've definitely familiar with him.
Yeah, I know. It works to the point here. He sent me a copy of his new book. It's about Trump, and I'm having him on because of it. And he said, and don't quote me, when I have him on the show, I'm gonna ask him to flesh it out. But he said that Trump, just a lot like Papa Don said, is a part of this deep state thing. Now, Daniel Estelin used to be a Russian spy, and he's a big Bilderberg guy. He's an expert, and he says that there's the Rockefeller side of the New World Order and the Rothschild side of the New World Order. I always thought they were the same. I thought the Rockefellers were subservient to the Rothschilds, but I don't know. I'll sit back and ask him. But let me get this out, and then I'll go right to you. He says that this is the first time that the Rothschilds, the first time in a long time, that the Rothschilds were able to put in their own candidate. And they said that it's not like he met with the Rothschilds or anything like that. They've manipulated this, and they finally were able to put somebody that fits their ideals, that it's all an economic thing. That's what he's saying. I don't know specifics. We'll get to it. Go ahead, Don. Go ahead, Don.
He might be frozen.
He's frozen.
Don.
I wanted to say really quickly, I'll try to get him back on if you want. I was going to say the chat room had an interesting point too, that the telltale sign for how Trump will be in the second term. If he gets reelected, and he just was waiting until you can't get rid of him. You tried to impeach him. You tried to do all these other things, and you figure he's not going to get reelected. Once he gets reelected, if he goes balls to the wall, and you see all this shit going down like in 2021 and, forward, then we're somewhere with that. If he doesn't, then it's really just status quo forever.
I think it's a very optimistic view, and I'm cool with it if it actually happens, but I'm highly skeptical. I think we're going to get more of the same. Trump is going to win. I don't think the Democrats have anybody for him, but when he gets in there, I think it's going to be more of the same.
I totally
He's
agree.
completely controlled with Bolton. Bolton, people are saying that that's his Dick Cheney right now. Dick Cheney ran the Bush presidency. They're saying that Bolton is doing the same to Donald Trump. Look at Syria. He said he was going to pull all the troops out of Syria, then reversed it, and it went from 200 to 500. Now it's 2,000 or 1,000 people that we're keeping in Syria permanently.
Why did I get all these wrestling heels? That, like, Dick Cheney looks like a classic oil can Harry. John Bolton looks even more like somebody that would tie a woman to a train track. It's like, what the fuck, man? By the way, did Don leave or did he get cut off?
He got cut off. He's offline.
Oh,
His
internet was cutting in and out. Maybe it went down.
Yeah.
Hopefully he didn't get into a one house accident or anything.
I'm trying to add him back on. I don't know if we'll get him. I think I'll text him and see what's up. Go ahead. Continue. I got a couple of other things. I don't know how much time we got left, Stevie, but I got more stuff on New Zealand.
Nobody knows how much time they have left in life. How's that for some heavy shit?
Wow.
Wow, that's heavy, man. Anyway, so what do you have on New Zealand there?
Couple more things. It'll be quick, man. So
we heard that about you. Come on.
All right, man. All right. It's all good. It's all good. I'll pay my dues. I got you guys later. Anyway.
Thank you.
Well, I was begging to do it when Don was on, and I just wanted to see his reaction without any kind of warning or anything.
All right. So March 2016, this guy, the shooter of in New Zealand, goes over to Turkey, right? Spends 3 days there. During that same time, Germany shuts down their embassy over there due to terror attack warnings. And then this guy leaves. Nothing happens. But afterwards, there was a terror attack that took place, and they blamed it on Islam, of course, after that. But so, all right, that could be a coincidence, right? So on September 13th, 2016, and this is all according to Sybil Edmonds, by the way. You can go check her out. I forget the name. If you just put her on YouTube, you'll get all this. I think she was former CIA. On September 13th, 2016, he went back to Turkey, and again, Germany shuts down their embassy. And not only does Germany shut down their embassy, the UK shuts down their embassy as well. Same correlation again with him or whatever. He spends 45 days over there. Then he leaves and goes to Israel for 9 days. It's crazy, the correlations there. Why does every time this guy goes to Turkey, they have a warning?
I'm back if you miss me.
We did. We got you. Thank you for coming back.
Yeah.
Why do they have a warning each time going out to the degree that nations, major Western nations, shut down their embassies as a result? Something's up there, I just think. Go ahead. Take it.
Maybe they were just closed for renovation.
Maybe. Both of them.
Both times. Maybe the first time around, the contractor didn't do a good job. He had to come back and clean up his mess.
Or maybe this guy is tied to intelligence out the ass. I like that option a lot better. Don, what's up? What were you saying before you got cut off, man? I'm sorry.
This stupid Windows 8. I don't know. This is the second time it did it to me on a show when I was interviewing Sarah Westall too, where it just suddenly announces it has to restart. It's like, what can I do? I'm stuck in the middle of Skype. So, stupid. Yeah, ever since Microsoft took over Skype, it's a typical Microsoft product now. But I don't know, what was I talking about before then? I'm not sure what I forget. We can go into something else.
We were talking about deep state. And how Trump, he's having, he's not draining a swamp. He's just creating a new swamp, his own swamp.
Well, I know what it was. Yeah. When you guys talked about like rival families and everything like that.
Yeah.
There was a book that was written, in the late 70s called The Cowboy and Yankee War. And it was pretty much in relation to the JFK assassination. It was written by a guy named Carl Oglesby, who was a former member of the Students for Democratic Society, but he was a JFK assassination researcher. And his thesis was that there were the Yankee types, which were the Eastern establishment, the Rockefellers and so forth, and then there were the cowboys, which would be like the LBJ types that were feuding. So I think there's always been that kind of element there. But I think some of us, and I'm one of those, I believe that there's something above them all, and I believe whether you want to call them the Illuminati, whatever you want to call them, some kind of group that I think coordinates it all, that I think orchestrates this, and the same way we see to a lesser degree, the way you can see the powers that be orchestrate the division that we have. It is order out of chaos. They want people fighting, because if people are fighting with each other, then they're not going to be able to concentrate on who it is that's pulling the strings and who it is that's responsible for the big problems they all face. So they can get distracted. I've talked many times about how they get working class people, especially, they're ready to fight over people on welfare, and I work for money and all that stuff. And it's pennies on the dollar to the corporate welfare and things that are going on. But you can't get them to see that. Instead, they're worried about what they saw somebody buying at the grocery store with his EBT card, or how big his TV is, and how come my TV isn't that big? And that's what I think they really get people distracted with that, and it's worked very well for them, because they can just the left now uses white males especially to demonize in the same way that other groups were once demonized by the right. So there's always somebody in there. Of course, internationally we talked about boogeymen. There's always some boogeyman that's there.
Well, that's in professional wrestling. You can only build your baby faces through your heels. Now the heels are the villains. I mean, same thing in your movies. You can't have a good Batman movie without a good villain. You can't have a good thriller without a monster. You need your Freddy Krueger. You need your Michael Jackson. You need your Predators. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and you're exactly right. And those are convenient, again, scapegoats, because otherwise, and there's a lot of villains, but otherwise people might start looking closer to home and realizing, hey, our enemies are not in Russia. It's not Vladimir Putin. It's not the guy in North Korea. It's not anybody in Syria or anywhere else. It's in Washington, D.C. It's the people that have been running this country into the ground for decades. That's where your villains are. But I don't know what it's going to take to get the Americans to put their yellow jackets on, because I don't think we have it in us. We've really become such a submissive group where we're keyboard warriors, some of us, but to actually go out and take action, I don't know that we could ever overthrow the kind of tyranny that we have right now. I don't think you get enough people involved to do. Unfortunately, at this point, I'm not advocating revolution, but something has to be done, because it looks as if voting is not an option anymore. When you have 96% or so of incumbents that are reelected every election here, that's a higher rate than the Russian Politburo at the height of the Soviet Union. They had a higher turnover rate than our American Congress does. And these are awful people. These are not George Washington and Thomas Jefferson and James Madison. These are putrid people that are so obviously corrupt a child could see it. And yet we allegedly return that we're either returning them to office, in which case there is no hope if we're really that stupid, or it's because of the obvious voting fraud, and obviously they're just manipulating it so these people win re-election every time. But I don't see any other hope, because you have to the courts. I was talking the other day when I was co-hosting with Ella. We were talking about a group that's trying to clean up the courts. I mean, the court system is so screwed up. There's no justice anywhere there. The average person gets no justice there. Judges are notoriously corrupt. So you have, and obviously the executive branch is just one person, and we usually have a sorry lot as president. So the legislature is our only hope. And if we keep bringing in the kind of people that we've had in my entire life, there's always a handful of Ron Paul types. And when Cynthia McKinney was there, people like that, but they're always maybe 10 out of 535, maybe. And I don't even know if we have 10 anymore, but there's never enough to get things done. And the leadership is always the same. It's always the same Nancy Pelosi types, Paul Ryans. These are just awful, awful people. And that's why nothing good ever gets done. And when we bailed out the banks in 2008, every poll at the time showed that 90+%, even Americans as dumbed down as they are, knew that was a bad idea. and nobody supported that. But both Barack Obama and John McCain did, our two choices for president. The leadership of the houses of both parties did, and lo and behold, they got bailed out. So we don't have any representation. So, someone once said something about taxation without representation.
Yeah. Well, this whole scenario that we're in right now, in my opinion, it's a mass case of Stockholm syndrome, because the government works for us. We don't work for them. Yeah. They're not doing the job. That's why the Second Amendment's in place for terror, and threats, foreign and domestic. So, case in point, I mean, obviously, there's all these people in Washington who are diddling little kids. People in California diddling little kids. People in Rome diddling little kids. And instead of hanging them up by their bootstraps and treating them like a piñata, we're letting them get away with that. Then you have other people in the hands in the cookie jar taking all the money, taxing us left and right. I'm paying in New York property taxes out the wazoo just to live in Long Island. It's ridiculous.
Well, at least you're close to NWYC or whatever that promotion is that you can wrestle on. So it all works out.
Well, you're close too. You're close to all your promotions in Atlanta over there. But I know the traffic sucks.
I'm also close to the CDC, and if their work ethic is anything like the people here, we're in a lot of trouble. The Walking Dead's coming.
But you guys in your business or any business you're in, if you can see, okay, how is the money being spent? What are we getting for it? In terms of our government, when most people break it down, okay, the new Republican mantra is to shout against socialism all the time, which is, they lose sight of the fact that we pay enough taxes to have a socialist nanny state. We're just not getting anything in return. We have the worst of both worlds. We pay from cradle to grave, but we get nothing in return for it. We don't get. Look at our roads and bridges. I live in one of the wealthiest counties in the United States. Our roads are atrocious. Recently, I heard, I have to check up on it. Somebody was telling me, I can't even believe it. Even I can't believe it's true. That apparently the GW Parkway, which is again the parkway that lots of lawmakers take. This is a very important road. The GW Parkway outside Washington D.C. is so bad with potholes. You know what the solution of our leaders is? Much as the solution to the Social Security crisis is to keep raising the retirement age, the solution there is to lower the speed limit. They're not going to fix the road. I mean, this is the problem we have. We're getting third world service kind of Norway type taxation, where those countries over there, that's why they all have the highest quality of living in every rating, because they get something tangible in return for their tax dollars. Now, we don't want to live under a socialist country, but unfortunately, we're being paid for that. And when America worked best, it was a mixture. We had some socialism. Social Security is socialist. Medicare is socialist. All that does. When America ran the best, and when we had the the last time we rebuilt the infrastructure was in the Eisenhower years, when we built the national highway system and things like that, which we haven't touched, in 60 years. Apparently, we think that's cool. It's fine. We'll not have to do anything more of it.
Well, that's because all the money. I'm sorry to cut you off.
Go ahead.
All the money that's being collected via taxes and the IRS is just going into the pockets of the Rothschild and the Federal Reserve guys. We're paying off the interest for them to print our money. It's going, and it's all a big Peter Pay Paul scam, and people don't realize that. I mean,
when we talk about the debt, when the people talk about the debt, that's not our debt. And again, nobody stands up and says that. Why are we responsible for that banker debt? Most of it was monetized by the Fed. We didn't sign on to loans for China. How is that? They act as if, we're just, we're spending, like we're spending recklessly, like we had anything to do with it, like the taxpayer has any control over these people, but they make you feel guilty. Well, you have to do something. We have to pay down the debt, or what about your children's future? Well, you don't care about my children's future because you're selling out the country. You're turning into a third world country. They don't have any chances. There's a college conspiracy. There aren't any good jobs out there, but they make you feel, and they've got to the point now where nobody talks about, hey, this is not our debt, but we can. And back then, years ago, back in the 80s, back when the right wing was good, when you had populist right wingers out there, they talked about, hey, we need to repudiate the national debt. Repudiate it. It was created with the stroke of the pen. Mark it off with the stroke of a pen. Nobody's doing that because, again, they act as if and it drives me crazy.
It's fear porn, essentially. It's fear porn in a way. If we don't have this incredible mountain to climb over and trust our politicians, which, by the way, pretty much all our tax dollars are pretty much going to fund the government and fund them, not for services and things that were promised to us.
And $65,000 in hot dogs. Don't forget that.
It all goes back. Go ahead, Don. Go ahead. Come on.
No, I'm saying the only thing I see that I'm getting out of it, that I still use the public library system sometimes. That's the only government service. The police. I'm fortunate if I don't get harassed by them. And I'm not going out and being a troublemaker or anything like that. I'm talking and writing, but I'm not breaking laws. I'm not speeding that kind. But I pray that I don't get caught by a cop, because I know it's much more likely that something bad could happen than something good can happen. So my tax dollars not, and I guess if I unfortunately there was a fire, I depend on the fire services, but how likely is that? I'm not getting anything out of government. That's why anarchism, has a bit of appeal to people, especially young people now, because all authorities seem pretty much corrupt. So why trust them? Why give them any power? And it's a shame it's come to that. But unfortunately, that may be the best alternative at some point when you have total corruption, is to just not let any of them have any power. And then you don't get any services or any protection, but it's kind of a return to the Wild West.
Shouts to Mark Devlin and on Acapulco. He just went down there in Mexico. Rob Paul spoke. David Icke spoke. Bunch of anarchists. And they went down there to give talks, and they all got together and gave their ideas. Who knows? Maybe it'll happen. But all of this goes back to the education system. He talked about, I think Papadon spoke about Stockholm syndrome. I would argue, while that might definitely be a factor, I would argue that it's the convenience of modern day living with all of this artificial crap that we have in front of us, and the education system. We've been dumbed down from a very beginning to accept all of this stuff. You talked about, Don, when the roads got messed up, what they did was lower the speed limit rather than fix the roads. It's the same thing they're doing in the schools. They're not, people aren't achieving the academic levels that they want them to achieve, so they lower the academic level so people can get over it. It's the same thing. The system is screwed up no matter how much we can keep going talking about auditing the Fed, all this other stuff. It'll only temporarily fix things. This entire artificial system is a real big problem, and that's a very deep subject to go into. But I just want to put it out there. We're being dumbed down through the environment that we live in, for one, and the convenience of everything that we're being fed artificially, and we're being dumbed down through the education system, 100%.
Well, we're living in very fascinating times because this is because of the internet, and especially because of the internet. Things like this where we can talk like this and we can have people like us saying things which are obviously you're not going to be welcome on any television network or anywhere saying these things.
We know better than anybody.
Exactly. Well, yeah, it's sure. But the thing is because people conceivably, lots of people can see this in discussions like this. And when Billy Ray and I have our shows, people have their shows. I can write on my blog. I can write in American Free Press. Alternatives like that, my books, things like that. Because the media is what it is now, because it's so accessible out there and people are consuming it differently than they did 50 years ago when you had 3 television networks. It was much easier to sell that live in because you didn't have all these there were no alternatives out there. And if you really were fighting the system then, I mean, we fought it back then. Some of the early people fought it on the JFK assassination level. And they were demonized, but they could only be so demonized because, again, you didn't have something like YouTube and social media that could crack down now. But because of the fact the censorship is so overt now, it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out because one aspect of our leaders that has always fascinated me is I can't watch television news. I cannot do it. But if you watch some of these fluffy morning shows with the good-looking women and stuff that are sitting there, they're also happy and upbeat and they're constantly smiling and they're throwing you Hollywood-type fluff constantly. But they're trying to sell you on that things are good. Things are going along smooth. Everything's cool. And the more people that watch that and realize this is a lie, a monstrous lie, how long can they keep that facade up? Because at some point, even they have to start feeling some guilt about selling something. And when they sit there and talk about college or something, when they know what's going on in college, when you have people that are coming out with an average $32,000 worth of debt that are not getting the jobs they used to get without a student loan. How do they keep selling that myth? So I know they're living in their insulated world because everybody that's reading the news is a 1%er. And that's part of the problem, as I pointed out, that we have this platform, a limited platform, but anyone with a huge public platform on a television network or something, they're a 1%er. So they may actually believe things are okay because it is in their world. And they don't want to hear from people like us because they're saying that can't be. But it is fascinating. This would be a great thing to watch if it was a science fiction movie. If it wasn't reality.
You have a valid point. I mean, it does definitely make for some entertainment because it's a lot of fluff, like you said, a lot of hogwash and shenanigans. I have to disagree with Ray. I think if we take out the Federal Reserve and kill the nucleus of the cancer, I think that's where everything will start to come into fold. I think if we take out the IRS and do a flat-based tax system where there are no write-offs, no deductions, and everybody knows, you got to pay your taxes and it's automatically deducted from your check or your for corporations, they'll pay money on taxes on revenue, on gross, as opposed to net, so they can't expense everything. I think sooner or later, that would help out the economy in the long run, in my opinion, anyway. As far as the government itself, you know what? We should put terms on Congress.
Absolutely.
We should have ballots where people's parties aren't listed on the ballot.
Well, Donald Trump's going to do. He talked about term limits too, so I'm sure he'll be advocating that.
Yeah. Well, what about the fact they shouldn't automatically get money for the rest of their life after serving a term?
I have a whole section of that in Survival of the Richest called "The Best and the Brightest." It's unbelievable.
AOC is going to make money for the rest of her life doing the job she's doing right now.
She may make more than any because she came in at such a young age. I mean, who knows? She may serve 50 years in there.
Well, she got 12 years to live anyway, according to her, so we won't have to pay out.
She's going to run for president in 8 years, I guarantee you.
She came out of a casting call.
Yes,
I see that.
This is American Idol.
Her and and Omar, I forget her name.
And the woman from Georgia too, I think, too, right?
They came out of a casting call, man. It's crazy. That's the way they're producing politicians nowadays. And I would go as far as to say that a lot of the same things came into play when Trump was selected to run for the president of the United States. Why would we think it's any different just because it's happening to AOC and Omar, whatever her name is, I forget. Why would we? Go ahead.
Herbert Hoover would testify as far back as that. When he found out he was going to be the Republican nominee for president in 1928, while he was attending the festivities of Meeting Grove, being the giant all-male cast. So I think that presidents have been sick rather than elected for a long time, and I think Kennedy got in just because he was so wealthy and he was playing the game, playing mostly the game kind of right, and they thought they could market him as this good-looking guy with the Hollywood connections. And I think they made a mistake. At least I prefer to think that. I hope that, that wasn't something that was planned all along. But I think that for the most part, the Huey Long types are outliers and they don't exist anymore, and they get assassinated.
Yeah. They killed Huey Long. They killed John F. Kennedy. They killed MLK. It's the same pattern. As soon as somebody comes out, they killed Bob Marley. This is what they do to people who speak out. You can make the same correlation to John Lennon, right? Like people who say stuff like this, dangerous stuff, or people that have a message of unity. That's another big thing. People that have a message of bringing people together, clip them. Talking about money, not race, nah, can't have that. Clip him. He's got to go.
Well, nobody today, certainly not Trump and certainly not his critics. Nobody's talking about getting together. They're talking about they have a different vision. And again, I think they're both two failed visions. One is the left-wing vision, which is now all identity politics. And it's basically call everyone racist, call everyone sexist. If someone says something that offends you, and you pretty much are offended by everything now, then you get them fired. Maybe throw them in prison and charge them with a hate crime. That's their vision. And the right wing that Trump now has come to represent, the neocon kind of right, is that everybody's a socialist on the other side. America's great. Shut up. This is the greatest economy ever. That so becomes an absurd argument. There's nobody there that can make the effective independent argument that this is ridiculous. The country is completely crumbling all around you. You're fiddling as the Titanic sinks, fiddling while Rome burns. I mean, pick your analogy, but I think that's the situation we're in.
Well, we always say on this podcast, if you're too far on the left or too far on the right, you're in the wrong part of town, because you can't be a fanboy and just you're off balance. You need your yin and your yang. You need to be an open mind and look at everything from every angle. When you're too far of a fanatic on either side, you're a danger not only to yourself but everyone around you as well.
And I don't remember us ever saying that.
What?
I don't remember anybody ever saying that.
What are you talking about? We say it all the
Well, you
time
just
that
said we don't always say
left,
that.
far
Not
right.
all that. I mean, that's a lot. I don't.
Yeah, not in those words.
I don't have CTE yet, but still, that's a lot to remember. I don't remember that.
GGP, I got your back on this, pal. I got your back. But it's the fact of, you do come in too far from one side or the other, and it is, you are gonna, eventually you're gonna just wind up and offend everybody, because, you come in from the right, you offend the left, you come in from the left, you offend the right. We try to get our points across, and we want to make sure we don't have people just take our word for it, just like I'm sure you don't want people just to listen to you and take your word for it. You'd rather you tell people your experience and then let them go and research, let them go do their own work on it. Let them all come up with their own ideas, let them come up with their own thoughts, instead of you telling them, because that's no better than them just watching, the talking head on TV and going, I believe what he says.
And I think we have to determine whether we want, and I've tried to point this out too, but people do not want to be consistent. They're all hypocritical, because they said, look, okay, if you're going to live in a country where, let's say, a baker doesn't have the right to refuse to bake a wedding cake for a gay couple, if you say he doesn't have that right, you can't turn around and throw Sarah Huckabee Sanders out of a restaurant because you don't like Donald Trump. You can't. You have to have some consistency. Either we all have to grow thick skin and say, okay, look, you can't be offended at name calling, you can't be offended at that, or everybody has the right to
that
be
time is
offended.
done. That time is done. There will never be that again.
And why would you want somebody to bake you a cake that doesn't want to bake you a cake.
Exactly. Why force them?
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
You have to go with your dollar. You have to vote with your dollar. Listen, Don, we got to close. But I just wanted to thank you for joining us here today and doing this for me. I really appreciate it. I hope you had a good time.
Oh, I loved it very much.
Good. Thank you for coming
We
on.
talk about the moon landing. We got to bring you back for the moon landing.
Yeah.
You got to come back anytime.
Yeah. We'll talk about the moon landing. Anything else you guys want? Love
Hey,
it.
plug everything you got to plug. I mean, I got your books here. I'll put them on camera. It's Hidden History.
There's history. There's
And here's Survival of the Richest.
the two that are out. I got Crimes and Cover-Ups in American
yeah.
Politics, 1776 1963. That's coming out in June. Bullyocracy: How the Social Hierarchy Enables Bullies to Rule Schools, Workplaces, and Everything Else in Society. That's coming out later this year. Those two are coming out. My blog is Keeping It Unreal. I write in the American Free Press. You can see my show is I Protest on the same great network, the Truth Frequency Radio Network, Fridays from 5 to 7 p.m. Eastern Standard. So we try to have a good assortment of guests, whatever I can get on there.
Awesome. Thank you for coming on. Hey, guys, Stevie, you want to take it? You know what to do here. So just go ahead and close it out.
Sure. All right. So Sal, what do you got going on?
Yes, sir. Right now, I guess, you were doing that thing. We wake up and we decide we're going to record, and
And everybody hates us.
And everybody hates us. So yeah, we do that breaking Sal, which I still don't get. I don't understand it, but we got that going on. We have some other stuff coming up, but also I've just started doing I got some new pro wrestling tees, some designs going up. I'm waiting for them to give me the thumbs up on it so we can start that at Pro Wrestling Tees, SCG shirts. Something like that. That's pretty much it. Papa Don, how about you? You're doing stuff. You're always doing stuff.
Yeah, never a dull moment in my life. Let's see. This 30th of March, I will be at NYWC, where I will be fighting for the NYWC tag team titles against the Rep. It'd be myself and my tag team partner, Talon. The 7th, I will be in New Jersey, 7th of April, that is. I will be in New Jersey, wrestling at Rescue Mania, which is Crowbar's show. The 20th, I will be at Immortal Championship Wrestling. That's April 20th, alongside Sal, and alongside Bin Ha-Min. And then, yeah, that's right. We're going to be there. And then, the 27th, I'll be back at NYWC, spoiler alert, defending my tag team championship. And then I just started a new podcast recently called The New Force Order. It's on the Hameen Media Group. It's a Star Wars podcast. I'm a big Star Wars fanboy, so you can catch myself and my buddy Spiro on that. You can find me at Twitter, at Greek God Papadon, Facebook, Demetrius Papadon, my YouTube page, Greek God Papadon, and my Pro Wrestling Tees store, which is Pro Wrestling Tees / Greek God Papadon. Stevie, right back at you, my man.
Well, I got StevieRichardsFitness.com, the 12 and 16-week resistance band training program, the most affordable, accessible workout programs out there.
Who's it sponsored by? Who's it endorsed by?
It's endorsed by Dr. Dave Janda from DaveJanda.com, author of Awakening of a Surgeon, available on Amazon.com. Thank you for asking. So anyway, I'll try to get him in touch with you too, John, and see if I can make that happen for you.
Oh, cool. That'd be good. Yeah.
So with that, also, I'm working on a chair workout, which people close to me that I care about can use it, and total strangers bury it because I'm not a top guy in DX. So that's always nice to know. People on Twitter are very nice. I really do appreciate all the kindness on Twitter. So that will be coming out soon. And other than that, at BWO Stevie on Twitter, at Stevie Richards on Instagram, and also ProWrestlingTees.com / Stevie Richards just released the vintage label BWO shirt. And they released a South Park one with myself, Raven, me, and Nova in the BWO gear. It's pretty cool. Other than that, the YouTube channel is all fitness because I'm going to stay in my lane and just be an entertainer. So, Sal, thank you for the advice on that, to not expand my horizons to anything
else. Don't ever do that.
Two things I just want to say. Number one, you can send your emails to newforceorder@yahoo.com or any questions or stories or memories of why you love Star Wars. Sal, your Horror Junkyard, where can they send you emails about your Horror Junkyard podcast?
Some email or something to figure it out. We've told you enough. If you're not listening, go fuck yourself.
Breaking Sal at ProtonMail.com will be coming soon. So
Billy Ray, you're a host here. You're a guest host. Thank you for hosting us. What do? You got some stuff going on, don't you?
I have one
Man,
more
thank
thing
you,
to plug,
thank you
but
guys,
we're
thank you
very
guys for
organized.
bringing me on again, man. I appreciate it. I want to say what's up to Ben Hameen, who isn't here right now. Yeah, Allah, the Ayatollah, having fun in Jamaica. What's good? I want to say what's up to the Strangler, Steve King, and the Andrew Bello. What's going on? John Prester. What's going on? Jimmy Jean and the Professor Chabelo Villa Cruz. My name is Billy Ray Valentine. You can find me over at Truth Frequency Radio at 7 p.m. Eastern every Sunday, and right here on hackerhameen.podbeam.com, theinfinitefringe.podbeam.com. We got big stuff coming, so pay attention. All right?
Hold on
Take
a
it
second. Just for everybody out there, Don, you seem to have a really good sense of humor, especially with the goofballs like us. We do have a special rebuttal because we did the Michael Jackson Neverland debate, and there's been a couple weeks of doing that. But we actually have Michael Jackson himself is going to address these rumors, address these horrible allegations himself. So that's what we're going to go out of the show with. So enjoy the. I have no idea what this is going to be.
I'd like to address this horrible HBO documentary about me. It's filled with lies and ignorance. I would never hurt children. I love sleeping with little boys, that's all. Just a grown man sleeping with a little boy. Of course I fuck them kids. Come on. It's so obvious.
Billy Ray, are you triggered?
I built the whole amusement park, the candy store, and I say, you kids like candy? And they'd be like, yeah, we like it. I'm like, yeah, you like candy? Yeah, okay. Yeah, well, tell your mama, get the fuck out of here. Then they did. I was like, oh, shit. Did y'all notice I only slept with little cute boys? Not little girls, not little ugly boys, just cute little motherfucking tight-ass boys. Well, better get back to heaven. I got in because I apologized right before I died. Damn the rules. Bye.
Y'all, everybody.